It's billed as the hands-off protest, a multi-city expression of popular dissent in places ranging from Boston to New York to the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., which witnessed the largest protest since Donald Trump began his second term as president.
They think they're going to overthrow the heroes of American democracy. They don't know who they're dealing with.
So are you ready to fight? Are you ready to fight? Let's go fight and win.
This is a very different demographic from those seen in previous protests.
It's not only the young and the angry, it is the middle-aged, the elderly. Washington, D.C. has been the center of the federal government, and tens of thousands of workers have been laid off under the Trump administration.
Love, not hate, makes America great.
But it's also a sample of Americans who have been dismayed by what they view as the cruel and unfeeling policies of the president and a man he selected to lead what is called the Department of Government Efficiency, Elon Musk.
I think everybody is afflicted with what's happening right now. We have young, we have old, we have middle-aged, we have everyone here, and we've got to come together to make a difference.
The message at protests throughout the nation is constant. Don't just resist today, but do so on Monday or week and continue through the months to come. Mike Hanna, Al Jazeera, Washington.
As the impact of Donald Trump's swift and wide-ranging tariffs start to take effect. Speaking via video link at a political gathering in Italy, Elon Musk said he could see a future where there was a free trade zone between the two economies. As it stands, the EU will have to pay a 20% levy on all imports into the US. World leaders have continued to react to the new economic order, with the British Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer and the French President Emmanuel Macron promising to coordinate their positions on any retaliatory action. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of people have marched in dozens of US cities in protest against Donald Trump and his policies since his return to the White House. Well, I'm joined now by Peter Draper, the Executive Director for the Institute for International Trade at Adelaide University. Peter, thank you very much for joining us here on BBC News. Australia itself has been hit with baseline tariffs of 10%. The Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, said the nation wouldn't introduce its own tariffs in return. So what do you make of the position that Australia finds itself in now?
I think it's the correct decision that the Prime Minister has taken. Imposing our own tariffs would amount to self-harm, and that's the basic position the government has taken. And retaliating against the United States would invite further retaliations, and trying to cut some sort of special deal would be a deal with an administration that essentially can't be trusted. So there's really no good options here. And what the government is doing is to double down on its diversification strategies, which have been in place for some time, while at the same time putting in place policies to build economic and trade resilience. So I think a pretty comprehensive response and quite a defensible one.
Because Australia quite often has to navigate between its ally, the US, and the regional power of China. So how are they going to strike the balance best for the country of Australia?
Yeah, that's always a balancing act. And one should recall that a couple of years ago, China also coerced Australia. And at that time, about 40% of our exports went to China. To put that into perspective, about 5% of our exports go to the United States. So we're far less exposed to the US market, and we can therefore, outside of a few sector and product stories, particularly beef exports to the US, we can take the hit, relatively speaking. In the case of China, when they coerced us, we opted again to just double down and take the hit and diversify. And that's what most commodity exporters particularly were able to do. But the bottom line, I think, on the foreign policy front is that this Trump initiative draws the region, generally speaking, closer to China. This is a golden opportunity for China to cement its regional relationships and displace the United States in the region.
And what
Well, it's hard to know if many people who voted for Trump turned out, but there were demonstrations in more than 1,200 cities across the U.S., and I was on the ground here in Washington at the near the Washington Monument, and there were certainly tens of thousands of people, expressing fear and anger toward Trump and Musk and Vance, principally Trump and Musk, around such a range of issues, every imaginable issue, from the attacks on democracy to tariffs, free speech, social welfare programs, NATO, Ukraine, science, on and on. I could take up all our time talking about the issues. And, there was a great deal of creativity as well in the kinds of signs that people had up,
President Donald Trump's trade tariffs and the radical shakeup of U.S. politics driven by his administration. Hands-off rallies have been held in all 50 states. There's growing public anger at Trump's policies as well as Elon Musk's cost-cutting campaign.
It was the largest single day of protest since President Donald Trump returned to office in January. Under the banner Hands Off, opponents of Trump's policies rallied, from critics of his economic policies to those concerned about civil rights, to climate activists in towns and cities in all 50 states, from New York's Fifth Avenue.
I feel horrible. Immigrants are getting deported. The president's so worried about 0.1% of the population, transgender people, but he doesn't care about the economy, he doesn't talk about lowering prices, inflation.
To Charlotte, North Carolina.
I'm here today as a person with a disability to stand up for all the 70 million people in America who receive disability, who receive Medicaid or Medicare. They are important. Their voice is important.
In Houston, Texas, people came out in defiance of a tornado warning.
I'm here today to say hands off of our democracy, hands off of our rights, hands off of our futures. I was a little afraid today that the weather might scare people from coming out, but I was so delighted to see that everyone braved the rainy weather and came out to fight for our democracy.
In the capital, Washington, D.C., demonstrators congregated on the National Mall.
We object to everything that Donald Trump is doing, basically in terms of his power grab and all the damage he's doing to the economy and to democracy.
Taxes. The hands-off organizers managed to bring together a wide range of those unhappy with the government, from civil rights organizations to army veterans to LGBTQ groups to climate activists. They all had one message for the man in the Oval Office.
This is what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like.
For more
video behind me, the biggest protest in Chicago since President Trump took office. A significant crowd spilling out of Daley Plaza and filling up the streets of Chicago. The anti-Trump hands-off protest, as it's called, was one of hundreds taking place simultaneously nationwide. Arnold Brennan was on the ground speaking with protesters about their biggest concerns.
I haven't seen a demonstration this big in Chicago ever.
Like oceans of people.
But it looks like this entire square is full.
When a protest gets too big for Daley Plaza, people stand where they can.
In the middle of the street.
This crowd stands against President Donald Trump and billionaire Elon Musk.
We will not be silenced.
Their message is hands off.
Hands off!
A protest against the administration's actions to cut government jobs, shutter agencies, deport immigrants, impose tariffs, and more.
I am concerned about people being kidnapped off the streets and shipped to hellhole prisons. I am concerned about our economy tanking. I'm concerned about the fact that we have a president who doesn't care about people.
Things are being defunded. People are losing their jobs. Just really terrible things are happening in this country.
There's something that every single person in America cares about that these people are attacking.
This is one of more than 1,200 demonstrations happening all over the country. There are protests in all 50 states. Here in Chicago, Daley Plaza is overflowing. After speeches, the people here will hit the pavement to march.
Look at save the future of the nation right in front of the very place that saw the start of our nation. This is what the rally looked like over at City Hall, where thousands of protesters gathered at noon and then marched down here to the Liberty Bell and Independence Mall, a mass showing of unity against several Trump administration actions and policies. The demonstration, one of hundreds planned across the country, and the largest one in our area that also saw crowds gather over in Newtown and Conshohocken. The Philly protests turned into a rally in Old City that included speeches from elected officials like Congressman Brendan Boyle and Philly's first openly LGBT councilperson, Rue Landau. Protesters in Philly say they're protesting Trump and allies like Elon Musk's
and let the United States be that beacon across the world. Hands off! Hands off!
Fraud, waste, and abuse are the three words that are being used to dismantle our government. These are mistruths spread by Elon Musk and the administration trying to take away our funding.
Is now gathering to demand the president stop what they're calling an assault on families, jobs, health care, and Social Security. Eyewitness News reporter Tim Caputo live to explain this national movement dubbed Hands Off. Tim?
Jory and Michelle, you see behind me, the crowd is fairly big at this point, getting bigger by the minute. They expect about 7,000 people here in Pershing Square. And to give you a sense of just how many people are here right now, where I'm standing is kind of on the back end. Over by the palm trees up on 5th Street is where the stage is, and they've filled out this entire park all the way through. And really in the last 20, 30 minutes, we've seen people at almost every street corner here in downtown LA working their way over here. So this crowd is only going to get bigger as thousands, potentially 7,000 people come out in this passionate rally against President Donald Trump and his policies in the first few months of his second term in office. It has been a sea of signs, all adamantly opposed to the president's agenda, including
Hands off! Hands off! Our democracy! Hands off! Hands off! Our social justice! Hands off! Hands off! Our economy!
Big crowds holding hands-off signs surround the Parkman Bandstand. What do you want their hands off?
Everything. Women's bodies, Social Security, trans kids. I mean, he's just going after everybody.
Then groups of people with disabilities lead the way down Tremont Street to City Hall Plaza, where Boston police say 25 to 30,000 people came to hear more about today's theme.
Response to President Trump's new tariffs and the cuts to the federal government overseen by billionaire Elon Musk. It's one of the largest anti-Trump events that we've seen here in Central Texas since President Trump returned to the White House. Today we saw signs, chants, and speeches from the steps. Several state lawmakers were here and spoke, including Austin Senator Sarah Eckhart. There was a lot of attention on what Elon Musk and Doge are doing, but this wasn't really about one
violent National Day of Action. Event organizers say they are marching, rallying, and protesting against the actions of both President Trump and Elon Musk. The goal is to, quote, build a movement against the looting of our country. One protester tells us the administration's actions are actually working against the people.
Hands off, demonstrating against a number of policies recently put into place by the Trump administration and Elon Musk. Drastic cuts to the federal workforce and slashing federal funding across several government programs were top of the agenda. There was also opposition on other issues such as immigration and tariffs. Well, hands-off protests also happened here In the Bay Area, Oakland seniors rallied together earlier over their fears of the future of Social Security, as did veterans at the Civic Center in San Francisco. Our John Ramos spoke to one who's concerned his Social Security checks may soon stop coming.
If people were waiting for an organized pushback against the Trump administration's agenda, it came today. But it didn't come from lawmakers, it came from the people themselves. People gathered in San Francisco to speak out against Donald Trump's executive actions in a scene reminiscent of the massive protests during the Vietnam War.
I feel as intense as I did when I was 20.
Jim Sanderson remembers what it was like in 1970 when Americans lost their belief in not just a war, but the nation itself.
That was a very, it was tearing us apart, and the war and all that. I feel like that again, but now the enemy's from within.
Thousands of people filled the street and plaza in front of City Hall, their faces reflecting a full range of life experiences and concerns.
Thank you for reminding us that sometimes the only way to be heard is to disrupt the status quo.
In the front row was May Alice from the East Bay. She, like a lot of people, is concerned about the possibility of cuts to Social Security. But she thinks it's less likely to happen if people turn out in numbers like this.
There isn't anybody that doesn't have a mom or a dad or a grandma or grandpa on Social Security. I don't think it's actually going to be actualized. I don't, because there's 70 million people that will hit the streets and throw this guy into a dumpster, you know?
The so-called hands-off rallies were organized by
Donald Trump has decided instead that he's going to Florida to watch a golf tournament and to go to a golf dinner tonight.
Between 93 and 2000, and Joe, you were in Congress for a lot of this, they actually reduced the number of government employees by 17%, almost 400,000 employees. They closed some 2,000 field offices. They got rid of 250 programs and agencies without so much as a court claim, a major court case. And they did it in a totally different way. They started out with a 6-month strategic review process. How do we do this in a way that improves government service to the people who interact with government? So it wasn't just about cuts, it was about how do you end up with a more effective government, all about consumer service. Social Security, for instance. It was about how do you have best practices when it comes to courtesy on the phone lines, as opposed to DOJ getting rid of the phone lines at Social Security. When it came to the IRS, it was about electronic filing of taxes to get people's refunds quicker. It wasn't about cutting so many IRS employees who are actually going to take in fewer tax receipts this time than we would otherwise take in if DOJ wasn't in effect. So it was much smarter. It was also about cultural innovation within the government. They had labs that were intended to test new ideas that if they failed, it was okay, but Gore was giving out so-called hammer awards in talking about the $600 Pentagon hammer. And you would get an award if you came up with a better practice that said, get government to work better to cost less, working better going before costing less. But an amazingly effective enterprise, and a similarity here that is just so striking, that is also the greatest difference. When Gore did it, it was at the outset of the internet. And it was all about how do you integrate internet capabilities into the government that allow you to cut, but at the same time allow you to serve people better. It was a major trust in government issue then, and the Clinton-Gore view was, hey, if people's interactions with government are better on a personal level, they will then have more trust and faith in government. And what ended up happening is they found all kinds of ways to integrate the internet. Here we are at the birth of AI with Elon Musk, who is truly an expert in AI. And there's nothing about how AI could take center stage here and cut smartly while improving how AI could serve people in a much better way. It's all about slash and burn, and it's not following this blueprint in the least.
Well, you know, it really is just a different difference between best practices, which most businesses do. Let's study, if we're going to make a great transformation, it's best practices versus Elon Musk breaking stuff, which is, again, that's been, I mean,
but it's an ideological perspective, which is this administration wants to break the government. That is what they purposely have set out to do. They didn't say we want to optimize the government. They said we want to break the government. We want to reduce government. We want government to be less than what it looks like today, and we want to make it harder long term to increase it all over again. And that's a big difference.
A new book from one of our colleagues here at NBC News.
Refugee camp in Malaysia all the way to the bright lights here in New York City. NBC News anchor and correspondent Vicky Nguyen details her incredible life story in her new book with the title Boat Baby, a memoir, which she calls a love letter to America. And we're so happy to say Vicky joins us now. Congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
So what you have such a remarkable life story, but there takes a little something to then say, you know what, I'm going to tell my life story. I'm going to put it on the page, the ups, the downs, the heartache and triumphs. What made you decide to do it?
The biggest inspiration has to be my parents, Jonathan, because it is a tribute to them as much as it is to America. The fact that they decided to take an 8-month-old bald-headed baby out of Saigon and get on a boat and just hope they were going to make it somewhere better, somewhere with freedom and education and opportunities. I just wanted to put that down because I know I'm not the only person whose parents have made those kinds of decisions and sacrifices and taken those risks. And people ask me, well, did you want it to come out this year? This year actually happens to mark the 50th anniversary of the fall of Saigon, the end of the Vietnam War. And it couldn't be a better time, I think, to sort of remind people what it means to be an American and the fabric that makes up this country and the sponsor families and churches that helped us get a new start here. So I'm just so grateful to look back, to chronicle this for my 3 daughters and their children to come, and just to put it out in the world because there's so many immigrant families with very similar stories.
You know, and then Barbie came out while we were writing the show, and Oppenheimer came out, and I think in a nice way it gave people like us hope to see that movies could occupy that space again. But if anything, what we try to show is how much harder it is to do that than it used to be, and how much of a miracle it is when you're actually able to do it.
So Evan, talk to us about the origins of this series, obviously drawn from experiences you have all had in Hollywood, but this includes something a producer said to you two over 2 decades ago. Is that right?
Yeah, we were in a meeting with someone who now runs a studio, and we were trying to get a job rewriting a movie, and in the middle of our pitch, he put his head in his hands and had a look of woe and whispered to us that he got into this business because he loves movies, and now he feels like his job might be just ruining them. Which was very impactful on us.
Very eye-opening.
It landed heavily. We did not get the job.
It seems clear. So part of what, James, makes this so effective, this series so great, is because it pulls, obviously, from Hollywood, including extraordinary number of actors and celebrities making cameos, making turns. Talk to us about how that cast came together and how much fun everyone's clearly having.
I mean, everyone was different. Martin Scorsese, who's in the pilot, he read the script and really wanted to show up and really just loved the joke of the Kool-Aid movie. I think he's actually has developed a Jonestown movie in his past, so he really loved that part. And everyone else was different. Seth and Evan made a smart choice to give everyone a joke. Everyone had like a specific joke that they were going to get to play in each of the episodes, and people really responded to that. They really wanted to come and have fun, and it was wonderful to shoot in LA, and people loved that part of it as well.
And don't go anywhere. We have a second hour of Morning Joe Weekend on this Sunday morning coming up right after this break.
America's closest trading partners affecting economies around the world. Let's get right to that story and some of the other top stories from the past week.
So, Randall, we've been talking a lot this week about how business leaders, sort of thought that these tariffs might have been a bluff, that Trump talked about them on the campaign trail, he did, and that cheered most of the time by his crowds. But business leaders thought, maybe it won't really be there.
Director of the Biden White House Council on HBCUs and former Virginia Education Secretary. I want to ask you about our historically black colleges. A new report from the New York Times finds the gap in gender-based enrollment at HBCUs is growing. Black men now account for just 26% of the students at HBCUs, down from only 38% 40 years ago. You now have nearly as many non-black students as black men in these institutions. The Trump's war on DEI threatening programs that nurture black economic success, particularly for boys and young men. What are the impacts if this trend continues?
So, thank you for that question, Reverend Al. First, let me just say that that is a trend, but it's a national trend. It's not just happening at our HBCUs, it's happening across the country. As you mentioned, in HBCUs, there's statistics that say that they're just 26% of the student body population at HBCUs. But from the larger community, Black males are only about 30% of the population. And so it's a trend that has been going on for some time. We've seen that, I've seen a report recently that showed that 50,000 fewer Black males are in college today than there were before COVID. So this is a real problem that we're having across the nation. I have worked closely with our HBCU presidents. I know that this is an issue in which they are keenly focused on. I know that there's a lot of different programs that they had, recruitment programs and partnership programs with K-12 to engage more African-American males to go to college. But the real issue is some of the challenges that we're seeing across the country in terms of this anti-DEI agenda that Mr. Trump is pushing. You know, these are not problems. These are systemic problems that are only going to be exacerbated as Mr. Trump continues to push this anti-DEI agenda. So it's a trend. But it's a trend that is very serious and that we have to take serious. We have to seriously put some procedures and some resources into. But it's not solely just at HBCUs.
Speaking of DEI, the Education Department has just threatened to withhold federal funding from public schools deemed non-compliant with Trump's DEI ban, telling state education officials they now just have over a week to confirm the elimination of diversity programs. At least is the Title I funding for schools with large populations of low-income students, the majority of which are minorities. What will this mean for their educations? And can state education officials overseeing thousands of schools meet this deadline?
As Secretary of Education, I don't think I could have met that deadline. And I will tell you what it will do is that it will obliterate our public education system. To impose these kind of threats on K-12 is a calamity of mega proportions. You know, DEI, I don't understand. Diversity is not a threat. It is a strength. And one of the things that is so disheartening about what has happened over the last 70 days is coming from an administration, the Biden-Harris administration, who supported DEI, who held up DEI, who understood and appreciated the value that DEI has to our economy, to our innovation, to our national security. And to just coming into this period now is just been really disheartening. But you know, it's going to obliterate public education.
Dr. Deidre Trent, thank you for being with us. Up next, 57 years since the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. My final thoughts. Stay with us.
Absolutely free. Text KNEE to 231231.
On yesterday, it marked the 57th anniversary of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., who literally led a movement that changed laws and the culture of the United States. Those of us that come out of that school of thought have the obligation to continue to make that dream a reality and protect that dream. That's why National Action Network always holds its conventions in April to show you may have killed the dreamer, but not the dream. And we're continuing that vein. We had our convention this week. Martin Luther King III and others joined me. As we put on notice, those companies like Pepsi-Cola, that we will withdraw patronage from those that do not live up to what they voluntarily committed in DEI. I'll talk about details of the convention and other matters on tomorrow. That does it for me. Thanks for watching. I'll see you back here tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern, live for another live hour of Politics Nation. Saturday show with Jonathan Capehart starts right now.
Mounting opposition. Thousands take to the streets across the country to protest the extreme Trump agenda, from market-busting tariffs to devastating cuts to federal agencies and more. I'll ask former Biden senior advisor Mitch Landrieu if this is a defining moment for Democratic resistance. A rough Republican week. The markets tanked, their advantage in ruby-red congressional districts was cut in half, and a Wisconsin Supreme Court seat didn't go their way. Political analyst Charlie Sykes and former Biden White House official Andrew Bates weigh in on whether this week was a defining moment for the GOP. Fear factor. The Trump administration is fighting a judge's order to bring back a man mistakenly deported to that notorious prison in El Salvador. Maria Hinojosa joins me to discuss how these wrongful deportations are sparking fear in the immigrant community. And on the run, Michigan State Senator Mallory McMorrow is here to talk about her bid for a U.S. Senate seat and why she says it's time for a new generation of Democratic leadership. I'm Jonathan Capehart. This is The Saturday Show. Do you feel it yet? Like a tremor before the earthquake? Politically speaking, I'm talking about what feels like a tangible shift in momentum in favor of a rising opposition. Today, in all 50 states and the District of Columbia, thousands poured onto the streets to demonstrate against President Trump's most harmful policies. This is how one protester here in D.C. summed up what they're fighting for.
I stand with many millions of Americans that want to see the end of a dictatorship that's starting to take away all of our democratic rights, fundamental institutions, jobs, health care, education, and everything else that we've come as Americans to love and appreciate.
No doubt that demonstrator heard and heeded the words of Senator Cory Booker, who said this during his 25-hour and 4-minute speech that spanned from Monday evening to Tuesday evening and railed against the anti-constitutional excesses of President Trump.
In this democracy, the power of the people is greater than the people in power. This is a moral moment that more Americans need to stand up and say enough is enough.
And like a perfect bookend, former President Barack Obama reminded all of us of our duty as Americans.
It is up to all of us to fix this. It's not going to be because somebody comes and saves you. The most important office in this democracy is the citizen, the ordinary person who says, no, that's not right.
After this week, Lord knows the ordinary person has plenty to point to say, no, that's not right. Chief among them are President Trump's so-called Liberation Day tariffs and China's subsequent retaliation, which resulted in the stock market having its worst week since the pandemic in 2020 during Trump's first tour in the White House. It also saw the S&P 500 wipe out $5 trillion in market value in just 2 days. This morning, the United States started collecting a baseline 10% tariff on nearly all imports coming into the country. And this coming Wednesday, additional tariffs will take effect on some of our top trading partners, including China and the European Union. Financial experts say these tariffs could soon raise inflation. And J.P. Morgan is now forecasting that the U.S. economy will enter a recession this year. Another
more tangible way Americans said, no, that's not right, was at the ballot box this week. First Buddy Elon Musk spent more than $20 million hoping to flip the Wisconsin State Supreme Court conservative. He failed spectacularly. Susan Crawford won a 10-year term on the Wisconsin Supreme Court by 10 percentage points, maintaining the court's liberal 4-3 majority. And in special elections in Florida, Republicans held on to 2 House seats vacated by National Security Advisor Mike Waltz and former Congressman Matt Gaetz. But here's the thing. Republicans only won those seats by roughly 14 percentage points each in very red districts. Trump won their districts by more than 30 percentage points just 4 months ago. For the past perhaps 76 days or so, we have lived with the fear unleashed by Trump. But former Vice President Kamala Harris had something to say about that this week.
I'll say this, fear has a way of being contagious. Okay? When one person has fear, it has a way of spreading to those around them and spreading. And we are witnessing that, no doubt. But I say this also, my dear friends, courage is also contagious.
Courage is also contagious. The wins at the ballot box, the Booker filibuster, today's nationwide demonstrations, all are signs that we, the people, are showing the courage Harris is urging us to show now. Joining me, Mitch Landrieu, co-chair of American Bridge 21st Century, a rapid response organization for the Democratic Party. He is also the founder of E Pluribus Unum and a former senior advisor to President Biden. Mr. Mayor, also former mayor of New Orleans, thank you, as always, for coming to the Saturday show. From what I understand, you went to a hands-off protest today in Baton Rouge. What did you see there? What did you hear?
I did, Jonathan. I stood in the same exact spot where 24 years ago I took the oath of office as lieutenant governor and made a commitment to defend the Constitution of the state and the Constitution of the United States. And I can tell you, there are a lot of people that are really pissed off. They're past their fear. Fear paralyzed everybody for a little while, but the courage that the vice president was talking about being contagious is absolutely happening across America, and not just with Democrats, but with Republicans and independents after they have seen in full force this week how banal Donald Trump's agenda really is. I mean, just think about it for a second. First of all, he unleashed Elon Musk with a hacksaw to cut off some of the most important protections across America. Then he imposed these unbelievable tariffs that are probably going to be the largest tax increase in 50 years that are going to get into people's pocketbooks. And on top of that, just completely eviscerated the market where people's 401ks went away. And finally, Congress next week is going to start kind of having to put their money where their mouth is and engage in what they have now boxed themselves in with cuts to Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, and other things. So the people of America have woken up. President Obama said it right. We're a government of the people, for the people, by the people. That's where the power is going to come from. There's a lot of energy out there now to talk about how important this is going forward.
So you think that the energy that you saw in Baton Rouge and that we are seeing on our screen there, there's a protest there in Chicago, but the hands-off demonstrations that we're seeing today, that energy is going to continue. This isn't a one-off.
I don't believe so. I think people are really frustrated. Now, they're thankful to Senator Booker and for the congressmen and the senators for doing what they can, but they realize that they have a short stick. And so the power is really going to come from the street. It's not going to come from Washington, D.C. It's also going to come as a direct result of the decisions that Donald Trump has made, which are just really bad. And I think that the stock market and all of the experts have said he's taking us down a track of basically ruining an economy, and now everybody's talking about a potential recession. Remember, Donald Trump ran promising to bring down costs, not make them higher. And
Well, but look what they have tucked into their pockets. They have little American flags just below the flag of their own countries, sewn onto their sleeves. In the capital city of Lithuania yesterday, thousands of soldiers and dignitaries, and also just ordinary people, lined up in the streets to pay their respects and to honor 4 American soldiers who died in Lithuania this past week during a training exercise. The ceremony was attended by the president of Lithuania, who gave a speech on the occasion. He said that for Lithuanians, serving your country is not just a duty, but an emotion. And you could really see that among the people who gathered. Lithuanian citizens were moved to tears, moved to genuine grief. But again, this was a ceremony for Americans, for American soldiers. Officials arranged for an archbishop to bless the motorcade before it drove to the airport to start the process of returning those remains, returning those soldiers to the U.S. In our country, of course, it is a sacred tradition that when members of the armed services die in the line of duty overseas, their remains come home to the U.S. in what's called a dignified transfer. Their remains are flown home specifically to Dover Air Base with American flags draped over the coffins. It's a very somber, very important, very serious, very specific ceremony. And a dignified transfer is often attended by the President of the United States as a sign of respect from the Commander-in-Chief. After that very moving send-off from Lithuania and from the government and the people of Lithuania, the White House announced here in the United States that when those 4 young fallen American soldiers landed back home here in the U.S., President Donald Trump would not attend the dignified transfer. He would not be waiting at Dover to pay respects to the service members who died, even as Lithuania's president made sure he was there to see them off. Donald Trump has decided instead that he's going to Florida to watch a golf tournament and to go to a golf dinner tonight. You know, given his previous comments, I guess you could say this is consistent with his apparent level of investment on this issue. I got to tell you, we do not play a lot of
consumers, and I'm not a fan of jacking up taxes on American consumers. So my hope is these tariffs are short-lived and they serve as leverage to lower tariffs across the globe.
That is his hope. Republicans on the Hill are uncomfortable, as you can see, as Donald Trump's tariffs continue to anger our trade partners and send the markets into a tailspin. But are they uncomfortable enough to actually do anything to rein the president in? Joining us now, Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar, who represents the state of Minnesota. She's also the ranking member of the Senate Committee on Agriculture. Good to have you.
Thanks, Katie. I was thinking the same thing as I heard Ted.
Heavy rains in northern Peru have left dozens of homes flooded. A river in Aguas Verdes near the border with Ecuador broke its banks Thursday. The fast-flowing waters reportedly caught people off guard in the early hours of the morning. Members of Peru's army rescued nearly 130 families. One resident said the water came all the way up to his neck. The latest flooding comes just 3 weeks after a similar round of intense rains. Sean Diddy Combs is facing 2 new charges just a month before the music mogul is set to stand trial in New York. Federal prosecutors have added 1 more count of sex trafficking and 1 more count of transportation to engage in prostitution. That means he's now facing 5 federal charges. Prosecutors allege that Combs and those around him use his fame and power to coerce women into sex acts, often under the pretense of a romantic relationship. Combs has pleaded not guilty. British actor and comedian Russell Brand has been charged with rape and sexual assault. CNN's Salman Abdelaziz has more from London.
Actor and comedian Russell Brand has been charged with rape and multiple counts of assault by British police over a number of allegations between 1999 and 2005. Now, to remind our viewers, Russell Brand was at one point one of Britain's most high-profile comedians and actors. Of course, former husband to pop singer Katy Perry, but in recent years, he has repositioned himself as a social commentator, at times being accused of spreading conspiracy theories on his platforms. Now, let's look at what exactly he is charged with by British police, and that is 1 count of rape, 1 count of indecent assault, 1 count of oral rape, and 2 counts of sexual assault. Now, these charges relate to 4 separate women, and the Met says that its investigation remains open, and detectives ask anyone who has been affected by this case or has any information to come forward and speak with the police. Now, this investigation was launched in 2023 after Channel 4 aired a documentary where 4 women had accused Brand of sexual assault, including rape. Now, Russell Brand has previously denied these allegations against him and accused the British government of trying to censor him. Salma Abdelaziz, CNN, London.
An American tourist has been arrested after allegedly attempting to make contact with one of the world's most isolated tribes. The 24-year-old Mikhailo Viktoriovich Polyakov made the illegal journey to North Sentinel Island, around 750 miles off the coast of India, at the end of March. Now, the island is home to the Sentinelese tribe, and visiting the island is illegal under Indian law in order to maintain the tribe's way of life and protect them from modern illnesses. Although Polyakov managed to reach the island, it's not believed he made contact with the Sentinelese tribe. The hunt is on for a masked pair of villains who robbed a store in southwest England for its soft, plush toys. They smashed their way into the store with a car and used a wooden plank as a battering ram. And they grabbed several hundred toys, including valuable Jellycat collectibles. Now, Jellycats are known for being so squeezable. The company says they're magic. The owner of the Gorge Bear Company says the haul is worth $25,000. The store closed for several days but has now reopened. 4 private astronauts are back on Earth after a 4-day mission aboard SpaceX Dragon capsule. The international crew became the first humans to orbit the Earth pole to pole. The crew included an Australian polar explorer, a German electrical engineer, and a Norwegian film director. They performed 22 experiments but focused on how the human body changes in microgravity. Cryptocurrency billionaire Chun Wang funded the mission. Their Dragon capsule splashed down Friday off the coast of California. Well, it's a big homecoming on Ecuador's Galapagos Islands. Dozens of giant tortoises bred and raised in captivity are now back in the wild. The young reptiles spent years in a breeding center growing strong enough to survive on their own.
This week, 170 tortoises were returned to their natural habitat to fulfill an extremely important ecological role within the protected areas of Galapagos.
The tortoises had health checks before their release. Park rangers say that thousands of them have been returned to their natural habitat thanks to these initiatives. All right, the matchup is set for the women's college basketball national title.
West, we are gay, we are straight, we are trans, we are America, and we ain't going nowhere.
All right, joining us now is Cristina Cinsu Ramirez, president of Next Gen America, and Mara Gillespie, former advisor to former Representative Adam Kinzinger and Speaker John Boehner. First, I want to ask you, Cristina, how big of an impact, if any, do you think these protests will have? I know people have been frustrated, people have wanted to get out and do something, but will this actually have an impact on policy, or is it not necessarily about that?
Look, I think we've seen an unprecedented overreach, a power grab by Elon Musk and Donald Trump. And ultimately, I think the only thing that's going to stop that is the power of the people demanding that government serve its people and stop slashing government, start making sure we protect Medicare, Social Security. People have been itching and desperate to show their muscle in the streets. I think this is going to energize progressives, Democrats, also independents that are incredibly frustrated and angry at what they're seeing. And that's why you saw over 1,200 events organized across the country. I think this is only going to build momentum to put pressure, not just on Donald Trump and Republicans, but we're seeing Democrats start to act like Cory Booker and other people speak up. They want the party to fight against Donald Trump.
In Alabama, because people don't know something like that until it directly affects them, or they're still hoping that we can find a way that we can help them. We have not been able to provide any information, and now we know that if a person calls, we can have them come in. We can find out how far along they are in gestation. We can help them find out if their pregnancy is viable or not, and then we can have a real, honest conversation with them about what do you do next? Do you want prenatal care? Do you want to get an abortion? And if so, how can we help you get that? How can we help you find the nearest clinic that is following your gestational limits? How do you find the help from groups like Yellowhammer Fund or other abortion funds, practical support groups to be able to get to where you need to go? But most importantly, if there is something that is wrong, or if you are just concerned when you come home, you can come to us for follow-up care. You can come to us and make sure that it was all successful. You can come to us to get contraception. And most importantly, if you get pregnant again later, and this time you do want to have that baby, you can come back to us and know that you can trust us to take care of you.
Robin, this isn't just happening in Alabama. These kinds of tactics are being used all around the country. What advice would you give other providers in other states that are facing these kinds of challenges going forward and how they operate?
I mean, it's really difficult to understand until you're in the position what it's like to try to weigh out the idea that we know that abortion is a human right, even if it's not constitutional at this moment. We know that any person who becomes pregnant has the risk that they might die in childbirth. And so abortion is life-saving. And we know that there are people who will put us in jail for helping them get that. And so it's up to each clinic and each physician to try and weigh those options out. For us, we knew that all of the good that we were doing and providing prenatal care in an area that did not have it, that outweighed our ability to be able to take the extra risks. But for other people, that might not be the same. And so if you have the ability to take that risk with hurting the least amount of people, I urge people to do it.
All right. Thank you, Janice Fountain and Robin Marty. That does it for me. Thanks.
This is the Katie Phang Show, live from Telemundo Studios in Miami, Florida. Tariff tantrum. New reporting about how Donald Trump is, quote, not giving an F anymore as his tariff disaster diminishes your savings and is poised to raise prices on everything from cars to shoes. Plus, dismantling democracy. Trump's executive order targeting free and fair elections. Why Democracy Docket's Mark Elias is calling it one of Trump's most dangerous power grabs we've seen to date. Then, bring the hammer. New York Times bestselling author Elie Mystal stops by to make the case for what it would actually look like to have Democrats take a page out of the Republicans' political playbook. And later, Boat Baby. NBC News host Vicky Nguyen on her new memoir, her family's dramatic escape from communist Vietnam and her rise from refugee to Emmy Award-winning reporter. All of that and more is coming up. Convicted felon Donald Trump nonchalantly mused that his beautiful tariffs would bring some, quote, short-term pain for Americans. But since their rollout, these past few days have been downright excruciating. Exhibit A, the United States stock markets. Since Liberation Day, as he called it, Trump has helped free your wallets and your 401ks of their money, as stocks lost $6.6 trillion in value, the biggest two-day wipeout in United States history. And since Trump's inauguration day, the markets have lost $11 trillion. Also in the fallout, automaker Stellantis is temporarily laying off nearly 1,000 workers here in the United States. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell is warning of rising inflation. And for the gamers in your life, Nintendo is delaying pre-sales of its new console. But Trump's not worried. Far from it. While the markets plummeted and the American economy was being destroyed, Trump was hosting a Saudi-backed golf tournament, attending a $1 million a plate dinner, and intentionally skipping the dignified transfer of the remains of 4 American soldiers. Trump's universal 10% tariffs on most countries go into effect today. So tell me, are you tired of winning yet? Joining me now is Democratic Congressman Jimmy Gomez of the great state of California. He's a member of the House Ways and Means Committee. Congressman, thank you for joining our show and getting us started. Trump posting about his tariffs this morning, telling Americans he just got to hang tough. But you released a statement where you didn't hold back, and you said in part, Trump's dumb tariffs are nothing more than attacks on working families. Talk a little bit more about how absolutely damaging these tariffs are going to be for everyday Americans.
Yeah, Trump's tariffs are when he announced them, it was a national sales tax across the board, the largest tax increase in U.S. history. And you don't have to believe me. You can ask even some of his supporters that are on the right. They even called this ludicrous. This is going to undermine people when they go to the grocery store, cost them on average $200 more or more a year when it comes to groceries. When it comes to shoes and clothing, think about it. 99% of the shoes that people buy are made outside the U.S. So as a new dad, I have a toddler. That kid grows and grows and grows. So we have to buy him shoes more often than I would like, but that's what we have to do. So that squeeze on working parents is going to be devastating. The dad that, instead of going to the auto repair shop, he goes to AutoZone. Well, those prices are going to go up. And what's going to happen is as revenue declines because consumers are tightening their belts, then all of a sudden businesses are going to start cutting back on hours. Then they're going to lay off workers. Some are actually laying off workers already. And this is going to create a downward spiral when it comes to higher unemployment, when it comes to, at the same time, seeing inflation, when inflation should actually be going down. So this could be hurting working families, almost costing them $3,800 a year on average. So it's going to be bad. And you know what? Trump and his administration don't care because they come from the billionaire class. They don't have to worry about living expenses. But the rest of us people on the ground, we do.
Yeah, so let's talk about Trump's priorities. As I mentioned earlier, Trump missed out on the dignified transfer of 4 American soldiers who died in Lithuania, instead choosing to attend a golf tournament and a fundraising dinner. And last week, Congressman, Trump claimed he knew nothing about them, even though search operations had already been underway for hours. What do you make of Trump's lack of respect for these soldiers, their families, these soldiers who lost their lives in the line of duty?
Trump has always had a disdain for people in uniform. He often called them suckers. So it's not a surprise, but this should be an insult to every family who has ever lost anybody, every mom and dad whose child is currently serving in the military. The job of the commander-in-chief is not only to protect our women and men in uniform, but also when they lose a life, for whatever reason, they should be there. That's the one thing. I know that when I was a staffer, even on the Hill back in 2002, I used to write the notices of when somebody lost their life in battle. And guess what? I still remember those names today. So that's what it should mean. You should know everybody. You should really prioritize that. But Donald Trump, he doesn't prioritize the American people if they're in uniform or not.
Congressman, just a few weeks ago, you actually took the time to do a town hall in Bakersfield so you could meet with constituents to find out how they're doing to address their concerns and frustrations because they were not hearing back from their Republican representatives. Tell us briefly what's going on in terms of your constituents and what their concerns are.
Oh, my constituents, I've had a town hall. I was on Social Security and Medicaid and Medicare. They're concerned that Donald Trump and Elon Musk are dismantling our federal government. They're trying to defund it. Then they're trying to defraud the American people by saying that they're going to give tax cuts that are going to help everybody. But everybody knows that those tax cuts, those tax breaks are going to the billionaires and the largest corporations. All the while, they're lying about it. So they want to know what we're going to do to continue to fight back. They saw that I went to Bakersfield, California, because that's where we need to win some hearts and minds over. But I'm also organizing a town hall. It's actually an organizing town hall that will help organize the people here in LA to go out to these battlegrounds, to talk to people who don't listen to our cable shows, don't read our newspapers. They're on different platforms. And the only way we can get to them is by knocking on their door or making phone calls or sending them a text message. So we're on the ground and we're getting activated and we're getting organized.
Well, you are meeting the people where they are, and that's critical at this moment. Congressman Jimmy Gomez, thanks for joining us. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Joining me now for a more in-depth conversation is Alencia Johnson, political strategist, founder, and chief impact officer of 1063 West Broad. She's also the author of the best-selling Flip the Tables, the Everyday Disruptor's Guide to Finding Courage and Making Change. Alencia, it's good to see you. Let's start with WAPO reporting that Donald Trump's state of mind this week is pretty much the following. A White House official saying he's at the peak of just not giving an F anymore. Bad news stories? Doesn't give an F. He's going to do what he's going to do. How is any American going to think that this is an acceptable way to govern?
Listen, I mean, the interesting thing is that people are outraged and they're acting surprised as if this isn't who he was in his first term in office. And so the reality is the people have to show that this is not exactly what they voted for and that some people, this isn't exactly what they want. And so they have to continue to make it known to their elected officials and to these corporations and to all of these institutions that are cowering to Donald Trump that this is actually not what the American people want or need. And quite frankly, I appreciate that some of these other countries that he's trying to negotiate with, if that's what you call it, are also standing up to him.
So, Alencia, our friends over at the Seneca Project put together a montage of former Vice President and presidential candidate Kamala Harris's message while on the campaign trail. Take a quick listen to a little bit of it.
Donald Trump's plans for the economy would accelerate inflation and invite a recession by the middle of next year.
Increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. Increase inflation and invite a recession by the middle of next year.
I mean, Alencia, it kept going. I don't know how she could not have been any clearer to Americans about what would happen if Trump got elected and was able to be given a chance to institute or implement any of his economic policies.
You know, honestly, one of the most American things to do is to hear something that you don't want to believe to be true, not believe it, and then it happened, and then dig your heels in and be like, I can't believe she's telling me I told you so. But the reality is, if America would have listened to women in 2016, but also black women in 2024, and a black woman candidate, we would not be in this position. And so I actually think people need to be accountable for their actions and pay attention and look in the mirror and understand that sometimes you actually make a wrong decision. It has consequences. Own up to that mistake. And come on this side to fight against this. She was extremely clear, and people were knocking her for saying earlier this week she wasn't saying I told you so, but was alluding to it. I would walk around saying I told you so because she did. And people actually can't be rewarded for their wrong decisions. We've got to actually atone for those because people are being harmed, and people will die under Donald Trump's policies.
Alencia, I need everybody to go out and read your book, Flip the Tables, because one, it's a great read, and two, the messaging could not be more crisp and clear to understand. Something that you address in your book is the following: this idea of reclaiming Christianity as a tool for justice and not for oppression. And I find that it resonates so greatly right now because the weaponization of Christianity by the Republicans under this guise of Christian nationalism, it is part of what they use as excuses to be able to oppress people, to institute and implement voter suppression and other ideas. Talk about your book and why you thought it was important to own the fact that Christianity is a big part of your life.
Yeah, well, the title of the book comes from my favorite story of Jesus when he flipped over tables in the temple because he was tired of the hypocrites and those mocking God, which feels like it's kind of happening right now. And so the big question that I have is, what are the proverbial tables in our lives that have to be destroyed? Those around us in our community, as well as those within our own lives that keep us from being our authentic self and making those courageous decisions that lead to massive change. For me, my politics is actually because I have studied the Bible and I read the red text in the New Testament, and it talks about, you know, Jesus' teachings talk about being there for the poor and take care of the poor. It invites people in, and even Jesus himself engaged with people that some of his disciples said, do not touch them, do not be with them, and yet he actually ministered to them as well and healed them as well. And so I actually think that this is the time for people of faith, and not just Christians, but people of faith to reclaim the actual real teachings of the Bible and of Jesus, and understand that they're actually not mutually exclusive from our politics. It is the reason that I operate my politics politics the way that I do because of the way that I understand my faith to be. And if we had more of us on our side being bold about our faith, the right couldn't weaponize it in the way that it has done.
Alencia, and briefly, I wanted to ask you the following. We've got more than 280,000 federal workers that have been let go because of terminated, let go because of DOGE. And we have these tariffs that are embattling us now, and the price of everything is just going to go up. How do we take messages and lessons from your book and those people that are truly suffering right now? How do they take lessons from your book and say, you know what? I know I'm in it, and I know I'm in it bad right now, but I can still affect change. I'm not down and out for the count.
Look, this is the time for us to be in community and find community interventions. We will find safety there. We will find joy. We will find rest. And that is where we will find protection and help each other on the other side. But it takes the courage to get to know your neighbors. And the reality is a lot of us aren't doing that. So right now, I need those folks as they're feeling the pain to get in the community with one another, because there's a whole community ready to hold them and be that intervention in the midst of all of this harm that Donald Trump is imparting on this nation.
Alencia Johnson, I want to thank you so much for being here, and I would tell everybody to go out and get your book, Flip the Tables. It's amazing. Thanks.
Thank you.
Abraham Lincoln declared America's, quote, government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. But more than 160 years later, Donald Trump is seemingly looking to strip the people of their power, signing an executive order that would require people to provide documentary proof of citizenship when registering to vote, and demanding that all mail ballots be received by Election Day. Now, Democrats are suing to block the move, claiming it threatens mass disenfranchisement of American voters and that it's unconstitutional, saying, quote, although the order extensively reflects the president's personal grievances, conspiratorial beliefs, and election denialism, nowhere does it, nor could it, identify any legal authority he possesses to impose such sweeping changes upon how Americans vote. The reason why is clear. The president possesses no such authority. Joining me now is Mark Elias, voting rights attorney and founder of Democracy Docket. Mark, it's always so good to have you here. Let's start with some numbers so people understand what's at stake. According to the Brennan Center and the University of Maryland in 2023, more than 9% of American citizens of voting age, that's about 21.3 million people, they don't have proof of citizenship readily available. And at least 3.8 million of them don't even have these documents at all, often because they were lost, destroyed, or stolen. And then, for example, in the state of Washington, they use a 100% mail-in ballot system. So nearly 4 million of the 5 million voters in the state mailed in their ballot. So that was more than 250,000 ballots that were postmarked on time but arrived after Election Day in that 2024 presidential election. I mean, Mark, with all of that in mind, talk about why this latest executive order is such an existential threat to free and fair elections.
Yeah, Katie, first of all, thanks for having me on. You do amazing work, and I just want to say that at the top. The fact is that Donald Trump has issued a lot of bad executive orders. He's done a lot of things that have damaged this country. But the thing that he is focused on now is in some ways the worst, which is he wants to undermine the ability of us to have free and fair elections in 2026. And that's because he knows that his policies are unpopular and that the biggest threat to his authoritarian impulses will be being held accountable at the ballot box in 2026. As you point out, the order that he purports to put forward here would disenfranchise millions and millions and millions of American citizens. And it would not hit all American citizens equally. It would hit disproportionately young voters, voters of color, and married women harder than anyone else. And no surprise, when you look at who did he do worse with in the last election, well, it pretty much matches up.
You know, Mark, another part of this executive order that is giving some cause for pause is the fact that federal agencies, including DOGE, which is not a legitimate one, but putting that aside, they would have access to state voter rolls and the underlying data of that information so they could, quote, check for consistency with federal requirements. I mean, Mark, it's a bunch of DOGE check bros having access to people's voting records and other sensitive information. That doesn't sound safe to me. It doesn't sound constitutional, and it sounds pretty stupid.
Yeah, it is both stupid and unconstitutional. So let's start with the unconstitutional, then move to the stupid. It's unconstitutional so people understand. The Constitution makes clear who is in charge of running elections in this country. And what it says is the time, place, and manner of elections is set by the states, subject only to legislation enacted by Congress. Well, the Doges and Donald Trump are neither the states nor are they Congress passing legislation. So this is an open and shut case of where Donald Trump is trying to overreach and abrogate power of the state and aggregate power to himself that he does not have. Now to the stupid. I mean, Katie, Doge can't even tell us who the hell runs Doge. And every place they go in the federal government, they seem to break things. Why on earth would you now have Doge people rummaging around state confidential records? Like, under what authority, but also under what kind of common sense would you want the people who have done all of this damage at the federal government now trying to break our elections? The only reason to do that is, in fact, you want to break our elections.
Mark, I want to exercise a point of privilege right now to say to you, my hat off to you, not only to your firm, but also at Democracy Docket. I have been following, obviously, these Trump executive orders very carefully, the ones that have been targeting law firms, big law firms, big ones. Not only has your firm said we're going to stand strong and true against Donald Trump and the administration, but you've been name-checked by him several times. I want you to talk to our viewers about why it's so critical, even though there is this potential loss of money and clients and everything for these firms, why it's so important, though, to be a General bloc. To say, I am not going to capitulate. And I don't care what Trump is saying, I'm not going to capitulate.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I appreciate that. I mean, Donald Trump cited me as among the big reasons why he targeted Perkins Coie, the first of the law firms. He issued a memorandum to the Justice Department to go after all lawyers for what he views as frivolous litigation and put me at the top of that executive order. He went to the Department of Justice and called me and Mark Pomerantz, quote, bad people. He called me a radical who wants to make the United States a communist third world country. The fact is that Donald Trump fears lawyers who stand up to him because he knows that when we go to court, we win. He knows that because in 2020, after the election, I led the legal team that defeated him more than 60 times in court. He knows that because right now, in courtrooms around America, he is having his executive order struck down. Doge is being blocked. And he knows that the legal establishment is a profession that has an obligation to the rule of law, a higher calling than to politics or to their own financial gain. And so I've been very, very outspoken and disappointed in so many of the large law firms who have bent a knee, who have bowed down to him, and have frankly sacrificed their obligation to the rule of law for their own business interests. And I think you're exactly right, Katie. We have to call out the law firms that are not doing that. So I'm going to do that. Perkins Coie, number 1. Jenner and Block, number 2. Wilmer Hale, number 3. Covington and Burling, number 4, have all stood up, and the lawyers who have represented them, Williams and Connolly, Paul Clement, Cooley, all deserve a shout out, as well as the 500 plus law firms that signed on to an amicus brief. Because, Katie, as you know, if Donald Trump is able to conquer the legal establishment and prevent law firms from standing up to him, we will be in an even worse position than we are right now.
It'll be very dark times, but you know what? Those law firms, those that signed on to that amicus brief, the American Bar Association and the other bar associations, Mark, that are notably standing up to Donald Trump, they are picking people over profits and not the opposite. Mark, Elias, as always, keep on fighting that good fight. It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Coming up, hands off. Let's take a live look at the protests that are happening today in all 50 states to push back against Trump taking a chainsaw to our federal government. Plus, Project 2029. New York Times bestselling author Elie Ying-Mistal joins me next on his new book, Bad Law, making his case for why America should eliminate all voter registration laws ahead of the next election. He's going to explain why, coming up next.
Our right to reproductive health care is being stolen from us.
I can't believe this is the world we live in, where we're losing the freedom to control our own bodies.
And they're expressing their disapproval of the latest set of executive orders that are hurting everyday Americans and that are apparently only benefiting the wealthy. Organizers for the rally expect that this will be the largest demonstration since Trump returned to the Oval Office. And amidst the onslaught of Trump's executive orders, my next guest makes the case that we may have arrived at this current tumultuous moment because of bad laws. He writes, quote, "The law is not an accident, it's a plan. It is written with intentionality by people who want to shape society in one way or another. In our society, that shape is distorted to benefit a ruling class of white male elites and the industries and opportunities that those elites control." Joining me now is New York Times bestselling author Elie Ying-Mistal, justice correspondent for The Nation, host of the podcast Contempt of Court. In his latest book, it is a doozy. It's Bad Law, 10 popular laws that are ruining America. Elie, I don't know where you find time to write all that you do, but you always spend time with me, so I'm grateful. Talk about your book, because you have some pretty provocative takes about how we have found ourselves where we are now based upon bad laws.
Yeah, Katie, my idea was that somebody needs to start writing Project 2029, right? And it ain't going to be Chuck Schumer, right? Like, if you think about Project 2025, they wrote that, they started writing that in 2021 when they had no power, when they had just attacked the Capitol and failed. Right, that was the inception of Project 2025. So now, in a situation where Democrats don't have a lot of power, don't have a lot of political power, it is time for us to start thinking about the future. And when you look at what Republicans do when they come into office, they come in with a sledgehammer. And they take things away. They smash things that are important to people like you and me and many of your viewers, right? When Democrats come into office, we come in with like super glue and duct tape, and we're going to put some things back together. I could have written 10 constitutional amendments that would be super awesome and cool to do, right? 10 laws that would make us all smile and go, yay. Instead, I wanted to write, here are 10 things that we could just smash, that if Democrats are ever allowed to take power again, we can just smash and make our country better tomorrow. Because like I said in the bit that you read, the law is not an accident. It's not an objective thing. Charlton Heston did not climb up on a mountain and find some laws for us and throw them at us. That's not how it actually happened, right? We choose to live this way. We could choose to live better tomorrow, and that's what this book is about.
And, you know, something that you've said that also resonated with me, Elie, is you said the left has to take a page from the right's playbook and to bring in the hammer. I would actually amend that a little bit and say we have to bring in the sledgehammer based upon what you just said that the Republicans do. What does that look like, though? Because there's a big game and a big talk with messaging, and yet the actual implementation of something always seems to be lacking.
Democrats always say they want to protect voting rights, right? And that's great. I also want to protect voting rights. Your previous guest, Mark Elias, has dedicated his life to protecting voting rights. But I want to do more than that. I want to expand voting rights. I want to make voting actually easier for people. So one of the first chapter of my book is about repealing voter registration laws, not voter eligibility requirements. I'm not crazy, right? We should have eligibility requirements. You know, if you have, let's say an age limit, right? You got to be 18 to vote. I'm generally cool with that. I don't want my 9-year-old voting. That would be a bad idea. I'd talk to him, right? However, once you are eligible, once you have met the eligibility requirements, there is no need to have a secondary hurdle to pre-register before you go vote. If you're eligible, you should be able to walk into a polling booth and vote. It's that simple. And it's so simple that this isn't my idea. This is the idea of most democracies around the world. Everybody else besides us either has automatic registration, mandatory registration, or same-day registration. We're the only ones that have this archaic, asinine system where you have to register, pre-register 10 days, 2 weeks, a month in advance of the actual election, right? So I'm kind of, with that suggestion, I'm focused not on the 77 million white supremacists that voted for Donald Trump. I can't help them, right? That is between them and their God. I'm worried about the 90 million people who sat on their couch. The 90 million eligible voters who sat on their couch and didn't take a stand on fascism or no, right? And I'm thinking that one of the ways to motivate them is to make it just a little bit easier. And getting rid of pre-registration requirements makes it just a little bit easier for people who, again, are already eligible to vote, have already met the eligibility requirements. We're not talking about non-citizens voting. We're not talking about undocumented people voting. We're talking about eligible American citizens. Why should you have to pre-register in order to exercise your franchise in this alleged democracy?
Ellie, I got less than a minute. Trump has now asked SCOTUS via its shadow docket 6 times since he took office to intervene in cases much earlier than they normally would. He's losing his mind over nationwide TROs. Can you predict for us quickly whether or not you think SCOTUS is going to take any of these cases, because they haven't yet?
The ones that they take, they're going to take to help them, right? Like, this is a 6-3 conservative supermajority. 3 of the justices have been handpicked by Donald Trump. He's got 4 votes for almost every single thing that he wants to do. And the 2 in the middle-ish, Roberts and Barrett, seem to be willing to go along with him more often than not. He is going to win most of his cases in front of the Supreme Court. And one thing that liberals have to understand is that the courts are not coming to help us. What's happening today out in the streets, the hands-off rally, that is what's going to help us, not the 9 law wizards in robes on First Street in D.C. Those people, 6 of them, are generally in the tank for Trump, and he will find 5 votes where he needs to more often than not.
Ellie Ying-Mistal, again, thank you for taking the time out of your busy writing schedule to join us. Everybody go and get his new book, Bad Laws, because they are bad and we don't need them. See you soon, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me on your show, Katie. I love your show. My whole family does.
I love you guys too. Coming up next, beyond betrayal. As a federal judge blocked his administration from deporting more than 350,000 Venezuelan nationals that had temporary protected status. The judge saying that they could be, quote, irreparably injured. Meanwhile, Trump today clocks yet another day spent at a golf course, having spent more than 25% of his presidency golfing. Now, he's just a few miles away from where I am seated now, here in Doral, Florida, which is also known as Dorazuela, where more than 40% of the population has roots in the country of Venezuela, and that community feels more than betrayed. Joining me now is Adelise Ferro, co-founder and executive director of the Venezuelan American Caucus, an organization that's powered by the Latino Victory Project. Ade, I'm so glad that you're here. I want to start straight out of the gate with a really quick clip that I'm going to play, and I want to ask you something on the other side. Take a quick listen.
They used us. They actually, during the campaign, and I don't want to make this political, but during the campaign, the elected officials from the Republican Party, they actually told us that he was not going to touch the documented people.
So, Ade, I have a little bit of a different take. I obviously want to know why anybody would believe Trump when during the campaign he was so anti-immigrant, and he also said he was going to get rid of TPS. But I want to emphasize why and underscore why it shows that there were lies that were told by the Republicans and Trump in order to just get somebody to vote for them, to turn around and betray them. But explain why anybody would believe, in your community especially, anything that Trump said about immigration.
First of all, thank you so much for having me. It's not my personal case, but I can understand that in my community, we have a PTSD. Because we come from many years of a very brutal dictatorship, and in many ways has been, well, that's the reason we are here. That's the reason because almost 8 million Venezuelans have left the country. But we are used to, and sadly the PTSD feeling is something that make us believe in this kind of a strongman rhetoric and narratives. And somehow, because of what happened in the first presidency of Donald Trump, whenever everything happened with the Venezuelan interim government and all that, I believe that there was some kind of hope for him to do something again this time, for real, to bring democracy back to Venezuela and to do something with Nicolas Maduro regime. Now, with everything that is happening on that field, on that area, and also with the immigrants here, there is a very rude awakening for our community, and sadly, the price has been paid for the most vulnerable again.
So, Ale, let's talk about that. More than 61% of Doral gave Trump the presidency, basically. That's the first Republican presidential nominee to win Miami-Dade County in 36 years. So what are you hearing now? I understand there is regret. We see Trump and Kristi Noem pretty much saying, if you're Venezuelan, you must be tren de Aragua, which is a lie. You may have a tatuaje, a tattoo that means that you're tren de Aragua, which is a lie. So tell us, what is the community saying now? Are they saying absolutely not, we're not going to continue to support somebody like Donald Trump and the Republicans?
They actually are, they don't believe what is going on, and they actually are asking themselves, what did we do? And I have talked to some personal friends that are totally outraged by his decisions and everything that is happening, especially also with Venezuela, back in Venezuela.
Sure.
And they've more than betrayed at this point. They're really mad. They actually, they said, this is unbelievable what they are doing with us. We are good people. TPS beneficiaries are people with documents. What is going on? Why they want to, why he wants to make them undocumented?
So what are they going to do with that anger, though, is my question.
I think 2026 is going to be a good year.
Ooh. Have you heard that people are not going to support Trump and Republicans because of what's happened?
Yes, not only Donald Trump, Republicans, especially here in Florida and some other states.
What have you heard from Maria Elvira Salazar, Carlos Jimenez, and Mario Diaz-Balart, the Republican congresspeople?
Oh, you mean Congresswoman Maria Elvira Salazar, who said she was the leader of this push for Secretary Noem to extend TPS for Venezuelans. She actually posted publicly on her Twitter account, on her X account. And even though obviously it was not her who did anything, it was Judge Chen from California who ordered DHS and USCIS to put back in place Secretary Mayorkas' notice that was public on the Federal Register. I am asking publicly now, if you actually want to help us, ask them publicly, made a statement for them to drop the appeal, the TPS appeal in California that is being introduced while we are speaking, probably. So this is the reality, and we don't believe in them anymore. And I am pretty sure, I have never, but I am pretty sure our community is very much they know what is going on. They're not going to be used as pawns, as political pawns anymore, because the pain that has been inflicted in our community, Katie, almost 6, 7 of every 10 Venezuelans have TPS, and the other 3 or 4, according to the official data, are either family of those beneficiaries or co-workers or neighbors or friends. So yes, it is affecting us all.
Adelis Ferro, I invite you to continue to have conversations with me to let us know what's happening, because this is our home, this is our community, and it impacts all of us. Thank you so much for being here. Un placer.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Coming up, Boat Baby. Multi-millions of Vietnamese fled their home country, seeking to escape violence and a communist government. Among them was a small family whose long journey to America involved a small rowboat ride in the dead of night across the South China Sea, an attack by pirates followed by a 10-month-long stay in a Malaysian refugee camp. Decades later, the little girl from that boat people family would go on to become a multi-Emmy award-winning reporter and anchor. Joining me now is Vicki Nguyen, NBC News senior consumer and investigative correspondent, and the author of the amazing new book, Boat Baby, a Memoir. Vicki, it's a privilege to have you spend time with me this morning. You are a personal hero of mine, so I was so excited to see that you took your story as an immigrant and you put it in a book so you could share it with everyone and they could understand. Why was it so important to share your story with others?
Well, I feel the same way about you, Katie. Thank you so much for having me on your show. And I have to say, I wanted to put it in a book for a couple reasons. One, to honor the sacrifices and the journey that my parents took. All of their decision-making has helped lead me to where I am. And I think this country is incredible in that A person who is a boat baby refugee can go to national network anchor and correspondent in 1 generation. It tells you so much of what you need to know about the American dream and how very much alive it still is and what this country can be and what it certainly has been for me. So that is for my parents, for my daughters, for my family. But also, I think in writing the book about what this journey was like, growing up Asian in America, living in different states, Florida, California, Arizona, Nevada, and now New York, it's shown me a lot of what the fabric of America is made of. And that is people like my sponsor family, the Wares, the churches that brought us over here, a Lutheran church, a Methodist church. And I think the book will remind people of what it really means to be part of a community and really trying to make a difference in your corner of the earth, because that is really how any change is ever achieved, right? Is by you taking the small actions that you can every day to get to know your neighbors, to get to know the people who go to school with your kids, to get to know the people you work with. And before, I think the 90s kids and the 80s kids will appreciate the nostalgia in the book, because I think I grew up in a time where you got to know people as Katie Phang before I got to know what your politics were, who you voted for. I just knew you as my friend and, my fellow mother or another person in the carpool. And I think it's nice to harken back to some of that time and remind us of what this country is really about.
Vicki, you and I talk often about how important representation is. You're raising 3 daughters. I'm raising a daughter. Your book talks about, as you just said, in 1 generation to go from being a boat baby to being the anchor on NBC News Now to being a lead investigative journalist for a major network. Why is it then so critical, especially during a time of strong anti-immigrant sentiment, to show our children that is America, that is truly the fabric of what our country has been built upon?
It is. I think it's important for us to get back to understanding this country is great because it's diverse. It is great because we have different languages and cultures and ideologies and perspectives. And it is challenging as well. We're not a homogenous society, but the best ideas, the best innovation, the most creativity comes from us understanding each other's differences and finding a way to come together despite those differences and coming up with better ideas and figuring out how to include those perspectives. Because it's funny, like the book, I think, really highlights all of the things that we have in common and that there's so much more that we have in common than what divides us. But especially as a mom, especially as someone who, you and I, Katie, we can still probably count on these 2 hands how many Asian American women are working at a national network right now in 2025. So we still have work to do, but I'm really proud of what you and I have done, and I'm really grateful for this opportunity.
And I'm grateful for you.
Hands off Greenland. That's an independent country. Hands off Canada.
So do protests on the streets and from international manufacturers. Plus, the new documents that show the original U.S. tariffs had little to do with border security.
He really didn't have much interest in knowing what's going on.
Campaign trail promises. The Liberals on trades, the Conservatives on red tape, and the NDP on the doctor shortage. And
Alex Ovechkin has Wayne Gretzky get ahead.
1 goal away from bringing down the Great One's record.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Colleen Christie.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Donald Trump's trade war has officially gone global, with a 10% tariff taking effect on all imports from many countries. With heftier levies set to take effect next week, much of the world is now catching up to what's been the reality for Canada since last month. So-called hands-off protests have taken place in major cities across the U.S., Canada, and the world today. A coordinated show of defiance against Donald Trump's latest actions. The U.S. president is urging Americans to hang tough, insisting he'll deliver historic results with his tariff plan. Candace Cole has tonight's top story.
In Washington, D.C.
So we say to Donald Trump and Elon Musk, hands off Greenland. That's an independent country. Hands off Canada. That's an independent country.
And around the world, people have gathered by the masses to decry the actions of President Donald Trump and his advisor, tech billionaire Elon Musk. From Portugal,
freedom is at stake in the United States and for the whole world with what Donald Trump is doing.
To Paris.
He's upending economies of some of the poorest countries in the world on a whim. What do you say?
Everybody else, even penguins, were affected by the tariffs.
As Americans also grapple with the dismantling of government agencies with hundreds of thousands of federal job cuts.
Haven't seen a plan that this is making things more efficient. I've just seen that it is going to lead to more chaos and people really not having their needs met.
This global show of solidarity comes as Trump's unilateral 10% tariffs on nearly all imports take effect.
What we have is a set of tariffs based on what they've been charging us. That's reciprocal. We put ourselves in the driver's seat.
The fallout from Trump's tariffs have been swift, causing deep declines in the U.S. stock market and stoking fears of a global recession. In a phone conversation Saturday, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and French President Emmanuel Macron vowed to, quote, closely coordinate their positions in tariff talks with Trump as both leaders hope to negotiate better trade terms. In a surprising departure from Trump's enthusiasm for tariffs, Elon Musk told an Italian deputy prime minister,
I hope it is agreed that both Europe and the United States should move, ideally, in my view, to a zero tariff situation, effectively creating a free trade zone between Europe and North America.
While the world holds its breath and wallets to see what happens next, British automaker Jaguar Land Rover is already pausing shipments to the U.S. for a month to figure out how to deal with Trump's 25% levies on all auto imports. Candace Cole, Global News, Washington.
The U.S. Department of Commerce has signaled duties on Canadian softwood lumber could more than double later this year. Following an administrative review, the department says Canadian lumber producers could see combined duties rise to more than 34% compared to the current 14.4%. Canadian officials have said any increase would harm workers on both sides of the border. Meanwhile, the federal government has quietly updated its online travel advice for Canadians heading to the U.S. Official guidance now warns of the significant discretion U.S. border officers now have when it comes to deciding who enters their country, including the power to search phones and laptops. As the U.S. tariff offensive spreads around the world, Global News is learning Donald Trump's original tariffs on Canada had little to do with border security. As Touria Isri reports, even before the U.S. president's inauguration, he was seeing his northern border as an adversary, no matter how much Canada wanted to cooperate.
Canada wanted to work with the second Trump administration to curb illegal immigration. But in the days that followed, it became clear Donald Trump was not interested in cooperation.
Canada's a very bad abuser, also vast numbers of people to come in, and fentanyl.
Documents obtained by Global News show the Ministry of Public Safety planned to continue close collaboration to address emerging common challenges along the border.
When Donald Trump was elected to the presidency, he really didn't have much interest in knowing what's going on between our two countries.
So help me God. Congratulations, Mr. President.
The briefing notes were prepared 2 months before Trump's inauguration and show Canada's approach was rooted in cooperating with like-minded partners, particularly the U.S., to enforce border laws and share information to detect threats. They're dated November 13th and 15th. Roughly a week later, Trump fired the first volley in his trade war against Canada and Mexico with a social media post threatening tariffs for what he called ridiculous open borders.
Some of Trump's own officials, who've said, the problem is with Mexico and with China, it's not with Canada. So Trump clearly, had a bone to pick with Canada.
Since Trump's threats began, Canada has appointed a fentanyl czar and pledged $1.3 billion to boost border security. And yet, the tariffs remain. Taria Isri, Global News, Montreal.
A developing story out of Ottawa. The East Bloc of Parliament has been evacuated, and Ottawa police are asking people to avoid the area as they deal with, quote, a barricaded man. They say there are no known injuries. Sources tell Global News the man is contained and police are working to resolve the situation.
Back to paved roads or anywhere that we can kind of get out of this area. The water's just overflowing all the banks. There's no way that someone can take a car or a truck across this very safely. Look at how fast the water is moving. We've talked to neighbors nearby. They say they're hunkering down, hoping that a storm passes in the near future. But this is something that emergency crews are worried about as well, because they want to keep people inside and safe and not have to rescue them with swift water boats.
All right, Ryan Young for us there in Arkansas. Thank you. British car maker Land Rover is pausing shipments to the U.S. as President Trump's auto tariffs take effect, likely raising the cost of cars and parts by thousands of dollars. Now dealerships are scrambling to figure out how to stay afloat without gouging their customers. More on this when we come back.
What happens when one of the most famous dunkers of all time goes to the greatest lobster fest of all time?
I make Red Lobster famous.
No, Blake. Dunking happens.
Yeah, you're right.
Create your own lobster lover's dream with 2 or 3 choices on one plate at Red Lobster.
Sheldon, we here at Wonderful Pistachios take your concerns about our no-shells ads very seriously.
Uh-huh. Then what's that? Is that how people eat those?
You too! Get in here!
I'm going in.
Hey, Lexus, show alternate routes.
Technology that's ready for the road ahead. The Lexus NX.
You're seeing Skechers' famous glide step footwear everywhere. And now that famous design is available in hands-free Skechers slip-ins. Get the comfort and style of glide step now with the convenience of slip-ins with no bending down or touching your shoes. Try glide step Skechers slip-ins.
Safe like repaired, safe like replaced.
Nobody likes a cracked windshield. But at least you can go to safelight.com and schedule a fix in minutes. Go to safelight.com and schedule a replacement today.
Safe like repair, safe like replace.
Kate made progress with her mental health, but her medication caused unintentional movements in her face, hands, and feet called tardive dyskinesia, or TD. So her doctor prescribed Austedo XR, a once-daily extended-release TD treatment for adults. Austedo XR significantly reduced Kate's TD movements. Some people saw a response as early as 2 weeks. With Austedo XR, Kate can stay on her mental health meds.
Oh, hi, buddy.
Austedo XR can cause depression, suicidal thoughts, or actions in patients with Huntington's disease. Pay close attention to and call your doctor if you become depressed, have sudden changes in mood, or have suicidal thoughts. Don't take if you have liver problems, are taking reserpine, tetrabenazine, or valbenazine. Austedo XR may cause irregular or fast heartbeat or abnormal movements. Seek help for fever, stiff muscles, problems thinking, or sweating. Common side effects include inflammation of the nose and throat, insomnia, and sleepiness.
Ask your doctor for Austedo XR.
Nice car. Still for sale? How about I pay you half now, half later?
There you go, Jake.
Thank you. Did you just sell your car to Carvana?
Yes, I did.
Well, that puts this location into context.
I tried to tell you.
Sell your car to Carvana today.
You know Harbor Freight for affordability, but durability goes right along with it. You see, we test, and then we test again. Now, it's time for you to put us to the test. Whatever you do, do it for less at Harbor Freight.
For 40 years, I'd been burying my emotions and all the trauma.
I was grasping desperately for independence and hope. I found it with a tail and a cold nose.
I call him my battle buddy, because every time we're out in the public, he has my back.
Every time those demons start talking, he knows, and he's right there at my side. Mustang truly did save my life.
Here. Same time next month?
Okay.
Who's that?
Oh, just an annoying subscription.
He sucks. You gotta get rid of him.
I know, but he's just so hard to cancel.
Just download Rocket Money. You cancel subscriptions you don't want, right in the app, and it might even be able to get you a refund on some of the money you lost. Download Rocket Money today.
Do. And now I think we know the answer when it comes to you.
Wow. That's deep.
When I was diagnosed with HIV,
seeing obviously the stock market pain as a very early indicator, and there are people who are watching their 401ks go down and getting very nervous about it. I think his base is pretty strong, and they'll stick with him for a little bit. But the other piece of this is prices are likely to go up, and if you are watching your 401k go down and your prices go up, if you support the president, you'll have a little bit of tolerance for that, but not indefinite tolerance.
Amy, I would think that people who are looking at their statements are calling their members of Congress and their senators. How long until Republicans buckle on that issue?
Very soon, Michael, because I'm hearing from a lot of Republicans already, Trump supporters who are uncomfortable with how things are going right now. And they're going home for the Easter break shortly, and I expect them to hear a mouthful from a lot of their constituents.
You two have a hit book. I'm going to put up on the screen some of the headlines that have been drawn from the book so far. Put that up so I can take a peek. Yeah, there are some of them. Kirkus Reviews, dishy scoops fuel a comprehensive account of a historic election. Jonathan, what's your headline? Because I've read the book and I've read the takeaways, and everybody likes to isolate like, wow, here's the big revelation. If you were writing a review of your book, what's the biggest thing the two of you revealed?
The biggest takeaway is the broad one, which is that if Democrats keep their heads in the sand, they're going to continue to get their butts kicked. They deluded themselves into thinking that Joe Biden was going to be fine. The leadership of the Democratic Party told Democratic voters and swing voters that Joe Biden was fine. They told them all sorts of things that weren't true. And, what we've seen so far, I think, is a continuation of the heads in the sand. And the other thing is the Democratic Party right now is an anti-Trump coalition and has not offered a vision for the major things that particularly swing voters were interested in this election, which is, what is their vision for an economy? What is their alternative to what Trump is offering? So we can look at the tariffs right now, for example, and say, there are going to be a lot of people that are upset with that. But what is the Democratic view for a modern American economy? What was the Democratic view for how to deal with a border situation that has been untenable for decades? And the Democrats were unwilling to offer that to the American public. And I think if they continue to do that and continue to reassure themselves that just being anti-Trump will be good enough, they're going to continue to get their butts kicked.
Okay, decent answer, not dishy enough. Amy, let me try with you. Clooney, yeah. The essay, yeah. Obama, what went on with Clooney? Put that headline back on the screen so that everybody remembers it wasn't a politician, it was an actor who stepped out for the first time. I love Joe Biden, but we need a new nominee. Give me the 60-second version of Barack Obama's involvement with Clooney.
Well, we know that they all knew that this was coming. That's what's so fascinating. We report in the book that Jeffrey Katzenberg, who's an Obama ally, obviously, is trying to quash the entire op-ed. And it's coming at a time where there is a 1-2 punch for Biden. This op-ed is out there, and Pelosi is on national television essentially saying Biden has a decision to make. And what we do is we take you inside that moment of the book. It's amazing. You learn something new on every page, Michael. I'm not just saying that because this is our book. It is a playbook for going forward, and it is something that Democrats and Republicans can learn from.
Number 3 book in the country. Congratulations to both of you. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Michael, and I'll give you some dish if we can have a cigar soon.
Please, let's have the dish conversation on radio. I know you can do better than that, Jonathan. You still have time to vote. Today's poll question at Swerconish.com, will the Trump administration tariffs ultimately be good or bad for the United States? While you're there, sign up for the newsletter. It's awesome. It's free. Steve Breen, come on. Look at that. It's genius.
Salud. Smells amazing.
Oh my God. That is so good.
Should we dig in?
Eva Longoria, Searching for Spain, April 27th on CNN.
But it's also far too early to think about it. Now, we may live in an era where a lot of things that used to be completely off the books, over the line, non-starters, scandals, now are sort of discussed. And you can often find a large chunk of MAGA supporters who say, well, does Trump want it? If he wants it, I'm for it. And if he doesn't, I guess I'm against it. And that's how we live. So this is a big deal, even though it is completely unconstitutional and illegal, and the courts wouldn't put that name on the ballot of any president, any party for third term. But it's obviously getting traction in the conversation, and this is what Trump's telling reporters.
I don't want to talk about a third term now because no matter how you look at it, we got a long time to go. We have a long time. You know, we have almost 4 years to go, and that's a long time. But despite that, so many people are saying, you've got to run again.
Under U.S. law and precedent, that's the wrong answer. Remember, the president takes an oath to uphold the Constitution and has an obligation, governmentally and legally, to carry out that oath to uphold the Constitution. So saying it's kind of okay and you're open to it, you're looking at methods, but talk about it later, is itself the wrong answer for any president. It is just sort of throwing your oath out the window. Now, all of this happened, I mentioned in the amendment, because the tradition ultimately was tested. The tradition was 2 terms, but FDR, very famously, during an actual period of World War, broke the tradition and said, as many rulers might say, well, because of emergency reasons, he needed another term. And he actually was elected, having broken the tradition, because at the time, it wasn't in the Constitution. And that drew a reaction. Republicans were among the groups leading the charge and saying a term limit would safeguard the U.S. from a dictatorship. Remember, we were fighting dictatorships at the time, but then we had our own leader use war and other emergency reasons to get extra terms. So that was passed and overwhelmingly affirmed across the country, which is why it became the amendment. Trump ally and former campaign chair Steve Bannon has been pushing this, trying to launder it, trying to normalize it. And he says they want to keep Trump in office past 29.
President Trump will run and win again in 2028.
How do you think he gets another term?
We're working on it. I think we'll have a couple of alternatives. Let's say that. We'll see. We'll see what the definition. We'll see what the definition of term. We'll see what the definition of term limit is.
Sometimes some of the Trump aides and veterans seem like they're just freestyling, freelancing. This one, and this is a warning based on the evidence we have, looks like something they're trying to launder and normalize. And they know that the courts are supposed to uphold the Constitution, and I read it to you. So how would you even do a third term? Well, our colleague here, Kristen Welker, asked about scenarios where you would have someone else technically be president, but then, say, JD Vance could do that, and Trump would effectively still be president. And Trump said, well, that's one method. There are others, too. Again, we're talking about something that's flatly unconstitutional, and he's just musing about ways to do it or get around it. And if the idea of swapping in people so that the word president satisfies a legal obligation, but the real leader would still be ex-President Trump in some capacity, well, we've actually seen this dictatorial blueprint. In 2020, Russian President Vladimir Putin got extra power and did swapping out of roles, which drew, even at the time, revolts.
Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev has just announced that he and the entire Russian government will resign.
Everyone but Vladimir Putin.
A massive shakeup in the government, a massive shakeup possibly also in the power structure here as well. But of course, Vladimir Putin's still very much in the driver's seat.
Whatever position Putin means for himself would enable him to be in control, to be the ultimate arbiter.
He's been in charge since 2000, longer than any Russian or Soviet leader since Stalin ruled for 29 years.
Passing those Stalin numbers, we can show you the reporting on this. The whole scheme was basically swapping different roles out with Medvedev and then changing the Constitution Those power grabs have allowed Vladimir Putin to remain in power. Now, Putin was not president, so they changed the wording. And he had a prime minister in that country's system where basically, by swapping positions, they moved what were supposed to be term-limited spots into long-term rule, topping Stalin. Now, experts say they can't do that through the vice presidency in the United States. Quote, Trump is constitutionally ineligible to serve a third term. That is what makes the U.S. different. There are supposed to be these systems. Keep in mind, though, they are saying out loud what they want to do, and they're saying it.
President Trump is in Florida golfing this weekend after launching a trade war this week that sent stocks tumbling, resulting in the worst two-day market drop in history. The true economic impact of Trump's tariffs on friends and foes around the world will take months, if not years, to calculate. China has since announced its own retaliatory tariff of 34% on U.S. imports. Trump's so-called tariff liberation day has added to the turmoil of his second term, and his opponents are taken to the street this weekend, holding hands-off demonstrations to speak out against government staffing cuts, mass deportations, and the administration's ongoing dismantling of civil rights protections for all Americans. We start tonight with Congresswoman Gwen Moore, Democrat of Wisconsin, and a member of the House Ways and Means Committee. Congresswoman, let's start with the tariffs. We've seen the market reaction, but the real concern is how this will impact American consumers, many of whom voted for Trump, seeking lower prices and more jobs. The White House seems unconcerned about the pain they may experience. What worries you the most about this situation?
So good to be with you, Reverend Sharpton. You know, what worries me as a member of the Ways and Means Committee, and by the way, tariffs were our jurisdiction until Congress, both sides, Democrats and Republicans, sort of over the years abdicated our responsibility for tariffs. We should claw that back because of what is happening to us right now. What's that movie that I haven't had a chance to see yet? Everything, All at Once, All the Time. When you throw these kind of tariffs out there, you know, and put tariffs on 60 countries, you don't have the ability or time to build factories to replace the clothes and the machinery and the soybeans. Farmers can't plant it. And you literally prevent people lose their jobs. Farmers can't sell their goods. People can't afford automobiles, food, you name it. This is catastrophic, and you called it it's tariff terrorism.
Now, your state, Wisconsin, is the 13th largest agricultural exporter in the country. Your biggest trade partners are Canada, Mexico, and China. What will be the impact on farmers in Wisconsin to all of this?
Okay, farmers in Wisconsin do soybeans. $1.3 billion worth of soybeans are made in Wisconsin, and our largest market is China. So if they're going to put 34% tariffs on us, if they're going to retaliate, those farmers are going to really be in trouble. I had farmers come and visit me and educate me, come to the city to visit. And they have to, in order to plant food, they have to have ground cover and to prepare the ground cover in order to do that. Those imports from Canada, clover to cover and create fertilizer, it's going to cost that and bringing in rock salt to melt all this ice on Lake Michigan, this will cause an extra $1 million per shipment, Rev. This is real money, and it's really going to hurt Wisconsin very badly. You know, from the farm to the table, it is going to hurt people. And I don't want to talk about the fact that we have poor people, particularly in my district, who will experience inflation and stagnation is really what I'm concerned about. Loss of jobs on top of inflation. We're in really big trouble here in Wisconsin.
Now, I want to get your take on a slightly more encouraging news. This week, voters in your state elected liberal Susan Crawford to the state Supreme Court. The win gave Democrats hope this week, and former President Barack Obama urged the party to take heart from the moment and fight back. Take a listen.
It is up to all of us to fix this. It's not going to be because somebody comes and saves you. It's not enough just to say you're for something. You may actually have to do something and possibly sacrifice a little bit.
What lessons do you think Democrats should take from their win in Wisconsin this week, Congresswoman?
Listen, I am so proud of our Badgers who could not be bought and paid for by Donald Trump and Elon Musk. You know, and this is the message that I was delivering to them when they would say, Gwen, we want you to do more. I kept saying, yes, I'm doing all I can, but you are the power. You are the democracy. You are the ones with power. And I said, let's start where we're at. We need to win this seat April 1st. We don't need to be April Fools. And we need to show this man that Wisconsin is independent. We're thinking, we're hardworking people. And that demonstration, I think, is a bellwether for what Democrats can do all across the country. I was so happy, Rev. I was invited to go out into the red parts of Wisconsin, in Waukesha County, the base for Susan Crawford's opponent, and be able to talk to them and see how everywhere in the state, Wisconsinites moved further and further blue. As we saw how Elon Musk and Donald Trump were wrecking and robbing our economy. And I think that Wisconsin, this is a lesson for Democrats. Number one, as Tim Schneider would advise us, don't give up in advance. Don't give up the fight. We have not lost this thing, number one. And number two, where there are people, there is power. I just came back, Rev, to be with you from off the streets, to participate in the hands-off day, where we had a huge crowd here in Milwaukee, and we got to keep on doing that so that we can dissuade our Republican colleagues from voting for that budget resolution, which has massive cuts to Medicaid, which will hurt everybody in this country.
Now, let's talk about that. We're going to be talking later about those hands-off demonstrations this weekend. But you and your Democratic colleagues have been making good trouble over the government cuts since Inauguration Day. This week, Trump's Education Secretary, Linda McMahon, made a surprise appearance at a news conference that you and other lawmakers held outside of the DOE. What can you tell us about your encounter with the woman who has promised to be the final education secretary?
Well, you know, it was very kind of her to meet with us, but we got the same old, okey doke. And right after that news conference, we learned, that the Department of Education is going to claw back monies for anything that looks like DEI. The question I asked her, and I didn't get a satisfactory answer for, was, you can devolve to the states monies, but how do you retain those authorities, like the Office of Civil Rights, which enforces our civil rights under Title I and Title VI and Title IX? You know, and I gave her an example. I said, we have choice schools in Milwaukee. What if our Democratic governor decided that eligible Title I students in choice schools weren't going to get any of that money that you devolved down? Who would be there to protect the rights of those low-income students? She didn't have an answer for that, because the answer is that they don't intend to do anything with regard to protecting anybody's civil rights.
Now, before we lose you, the Senate has confirmed TV host and failed Senate candidate Dr. Mehmet Oz, Dr. Oz, to lead the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. During his confirmation hearings, Oz refused to say that he would oppose Medicaid cuts or whether he'd stand down on a potentially unlawful order from President Trump. And he's now overseeing the health insurance of roughly 160 million Americans. Your reaction, Congresswoman. We're out of time, but I wanted your brief answer on this.
Well, you know, I'm upset by this, obviously. He only has the best people, obviously. Maybe Laura Loomer decided to have him too. We are in trouble. This and them cutting all of the research for diseases. It is, you know, it is unhealthy for us as Americans and unhealthy to the world that we're stepping out of the space of saving people's lives and just putting TV stars in place of where we ought to have people who are doing good medical intervention and research. Thank you for letting me say something about this, Rev.
Well, thank you for being with us. Congresswoman Gwen Moore of Wisconsin. We're
and you know what? You know what, Rev? You know Donald Trump better than the rest of us, so maybe you ought to spend the rest of your time on your show explaining to us what he's doing.
I would do that if I could, but I don't think anyone can explain Donald Trump, including Donald Trump. But thank you. We're following a series of demonstrations against the Trump administration this weekend. Hands-off events are being held in all 50 states today, organized by a coalition of 150 groups, including labor unions, civil rights activists, and veterans groups. Joining me now is the president of the American Federation of Government Employees, Everett Kelly, and thank you, Mr. Kelly, for being with us. And you were with us this week at Nash Action Network's convention, and your union and NAN has supported each other. Let me make that clear. But on this, I'm talking to you about the workers that you represent. Mr. Kelly, you spoke to the crowd at the protest in Washington, D.C. What's this all about? What is your message, and what do you hope comes from these protests?
Well, thank you, Reverend Al, first of all, for having me. I enjoyed being with you during the course of this week, matter of fact. But the point of this protest and this rally is to educate the American people of the services that they will be losing if this administration continues to take away workers' rights, if they continue to take away services that the American people have that they deserve. Matter of fact, so the idea is to sound the alarm and hope that, you know, Donald Trump, Elon Musk will finally get the picture that, you know, the American people is tired of it and they're going to stand up against any wrongdoing, such as, you know, firing people for no reason. You know, as you know, last week, you know, he took away bargaining rights for 1 million federal workers, and it's wrong. Now, of course, we filed a suit, and we'll continue to file suits against this administration that continues to misuse and abuse federal workers.
Now, earlier today, Elon Musk retweeted a post claiming the protests were funded by billionaire George Soros and calling for a criminal investigation. I mean, what do you make of his efforts to intimidate those who are speaking out against him?
But that's exactly what's occurring across the nation, Reverend Al. That's the issue, the reason why they took away the rights of a million workers, because it was an intimidation tactic. It was retaliation against AFGE for standing up against these unlawful acts, and so they continue to do this. But we have to continue to stand. Although they're doing this, they need to understand AFGE is going to be here to represent the workers of America. And by representing the workers of America, we represent America because we represent the very services that is provided to the American people. And we will be here to make sure that that occurs.
Now, a senior White House official confirmed to NBC News this week that President Trump told his cabinet members that Elon Musk must be leaving his government role in the coming months. Do you believe he will leave, and does it matter now that he's already dismantled so much of the federal government?
Well, first of all, I don't think that he'll be leaving. I think that he paid his way into this position, and he'll be in it. He might be doing it from the back, but he'll be doing it. And he have caused so much chaos in this country, that, he should be gone. The American people is rising up and say that he should be gone. These guys, they're not thinking. When you think about the terrorists, they're just not thinking, so we got problems in this country.
Now, you mentioned it earlier, and I want to get back to it. Last week, Trump signed an executive order stripping collective bargaining rights from federal workers, stripping their bargaining rights. Your union is now suing the administration over that move. Where does that stand, and why is it so important?
Well, it's been filed, and I think we filed it in California. Now, it's vitally important that we file those suits. It's vitally important that we give all we got to make sure that we protect the American workers. Because if we don't, it's going to be an attack not just on the federal workers. This is just the tip of the iceberg. If they're successful, then they're coming after every unionized worker in this country. Not only are they coming after unionized workers, they're going to come after the very rights and the democracy of the people of this country. And that's what's at stake.
Now, we also saw the stock market this week tank, with the Dow down more than 1,500 points on back-to-back days for the first time ever, all in reaction to Trump's new global tariff policies. Some economists are now warning of a recession. What's the impact on government workers who are already worried about their jobs?
Reverend Al, thank you for that, because, what we need in this country is an industrial and trade policy that produces Americans' industry and our workers and, exports, the best part of our economy, better wages, better labor standards, protection for our environment, and a start to a raise to the top rather than a raise to the bottom, that's seen American wages stagnating, good jobs flee this country. And unfortunately, what we got is a series of tariffs based on a formula most serious economists and financial experts say is just wrong. And the results are hurting working Americans by, taking our retirement accounts, raising prices on consumer staples, and driving us into a recession where everyday America stand to lose the very most, the things that they work so hard for. I think that we are in a serious condition here in this country.
Everett Kelly, president of the American Federation of Government Employees, thank you for being with us. Coming up,
if achy joints, 10, even 20 years. Imagine you could do this without products that just temporarily hide the symptoms. Imagine no more. Instaflex Advanced. Get a complimentary sample just by texting knee to 231231. Instaflex Advanced is different because it targets the root cause of joint soreness and stiffness. It doesn't just cover up symptoms. Instead, it bathes your joints in its unique combination of 5 key natural ingredients found in no other product. Key ingredients backed by 5 clinical studies. Instaflex Advanced is so powerful, you could have better knees in just 1 week. Maybe that's why it's #1 at GNC. But you can only get your complimentary sample by texting knee to 231231. Plus, text now and we'll include a tube of Instaflex pain cream with its exclusive oxygenated oil for fast-acting relief from the pain of arthritis, backaches, and sore muscles, absolutely free. Text KNEE to 231231.
Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof,
or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press,
or the right of the people peaceably to assemble,
and to petition the government for a redress of grievances.
On Friday, the bodies of 4 U.S. Army soldiers killed during a training mission in Lithuania were returned home to the United States. Their deaths prompted an outpouring of gratitude in the small Baltic nation, which relies on the U.S. for protection against Russia. Lithuania's president was even present for their transfer out of the country. But our own president was not at the ceremony to receive them at Dover Air Force yesterday. Trump chose instead to start a long weekend attending a Saudi-run golf tournament in Florida. The snub was sadly not surprising. Last week, Trump seemed unaware the soldiers had gone missing. Yet, it is another reminder of how little regard this president has for fellow citizens whose lives are now impacted by his leadership. At the same time, Trump was turning his back on those fallen troops. He was also skipping out on the tens of millions of Americans whose investments and livelihoods are impacted by his new tariffs. Wednesday's Liberation Day announcement led to the worst two-day drop in stock market history. And now China has announced its retaliatory tariffs of their own. None of the economic turmoil was enough for Trump to rethink his golf vacation. On Truth Social, he talks about the trade wars as if it were a surgery that was successfully completed. It seems more likely we're watching economic malpractice play out in real time. According to the White House own documents, many of this administration's steepest tariffs are on islands with more penguins than people. Experts warn tariffs will hit low-income families the hardest, Americans who are most reliant on cheap foreign goods and are least able to adjust to higher prices. In trade wars, like real wars, Trump seems unwilling or unable to empathize with those who are on the front lines, who will be most affected by his decisions. Perhaps he even views them as losers or suckers. Americans must demand better leadership from this president, or our country may find itself mired deep in the rough for a very long time. I got you.
The global trade war. The so-called hands-off demonstrations also took place in other European capitals, including Paris and Berlin, as well as across the United States. Our US correspondent David Blevins talked to protesters in Washington.
There have been protests nearly every weekend since Donald Trump became president, but they are growing in number. There are thousands of people on the Mall in Washington today, right next to the Washington Monument, and their message is very simple. They're pushing back against what they describe as the most brazen power grab in modern history. And those whom I've spoken to are really concerned about democracy.
I find what is happening in our government so appalling and so immoral. I mean, that's really why I feel like I need to be here.
I finally reached a breaking point. I couldn't take it anymore. Actually, I probably win the long distance award. I came here from Hawaii.
Look at our country. It's embarrassing, like genuinely embarrassing to be like an American right now.
We have to speak out, we have to act, we have to do something, because this is not America.
What do you say to people who would argue that the people have already spoken in that President Trump won the election?
Some people have spoken, and then some people have not. And those of us that have not, we need to speak now.
This is just one of around 1,000 protests taking place in the United States.
All Trumps. He's been talking about tariffs for decades. He campaigned on tariffs. What's the opportunity for Democrats here?
Well, I guess the opportunity is to ensure that people understand what is happening. Like Donald Trump throws around the term tariffs, but I had to go back into my economics 101. I'm like, isn't a tariff, in talking about trade deficits, because what he's saying is we've got these trade deficits. He thinks it's bad, so he's levying the tariffs. And the trade deficits with like places like Indonesia for coffee make sense, because where are we making the American coffee beans? I don't think we're using that.
He's bringing up fights that I don't think Americans connect with.
They don't connect with, but I also think that some folks don't necessarily understand how it hits their daily lives until it happens to them.
Right.
And so I'm wondering, what is the DNC's plan for advertising to drive the point home? Because I know that there is a view from some Democratic elected officials that, people just have to feel it first. And I think that, yes, people are going to feel it, but if I feel it, but I don't understand who's done it to me, there's a disconnect there, and I don't think it necessarily will benefit Democrats if they don't understand who did it to them.
Yeah, I agree with you, absolutely. And we've been getting out there, as you know. I mean, we stood up 50 town halls in 50 Republican districts over the last recess. We're going to do the same thing in the April recess. The reality is we need to get out there, make sure the message is getting out there, paid communications, earned media, all of that, everything, organizing in all those digital spaces, as you and I have talked about. It's really important that we do just that. Remind the American people that this tax, which is what it is, this tax on hardworking Americans, is a direct result of the chaos and dysfunction of this administration, who so haphazardly have approached tariffs. Look, we know that tariffs, when properly applied and targeted the right way, can be an important tool to protect U.S. industry. I'm from Minnesota, right? It helps save the steel industry in northern Minnesota. But when done in such a haphazard way, and so indiscriminately, it's having a huge impact on all industry and people in this country.
Because they are taxing the coffee beans. Folgers coffee is going up because of what Trump is doing.
Yes, that's right.
It's potentially going to be pretty crazy. I mean, most economists are not saying this is going to be good news for America, and the word recession is coming up as a 50-50 proposition.
Up next, Newsweek's editor-at-large, Tom Rodgers.
Yeah, but then whenever Elon starts doing things that don't make the government more efficient, but just hurt people, people go, And this is playing out now in real time, leading to Trump, as we talked about in a different segment, wanting Elon to sort of make his exit. We'll get into a lot of different things, but this video has become the epitome of humiliation for Elon, where he went out during this rally, I've played it for you before, and said humanity, the fate of humanity sits on this Wisconsin Supreme Court election. I'll remind you how that turned out in a little bit. But Elon had this to say before it took place, and he was handing out checks for people to encourage them to vote for the candidate that he liked, and he was spending $20 million on this race trying to buy the Supreme Court election, as they accuse Soros of doing. And he was doing himself, and he was saying this.
It's just how important it is. They think it's just, some kind of judicial thing that's not that important. But it actually, what they're doing, what's happening on Tuesday is a vote for which party controls the U.S. House of Representatives. That is why it is so significant. And whichever party controls the House, it to a significant degree controls the country, which then steers the course of Western civilization. So it's like, I feel like this is one of those things that may not seem that it's going to affect the entire destiny of humanity, but I think it will. No pressure. Yeah.
Yeah, and my cousin, actually, is thinking about getting involved in politics. And if my cousin gets involved in politics and I treat them poorly, then they may not like me. And so then if they go and they become friends with a powerful member of Congress, and then they fall in love, that's crazy, and then they get married, and then that congressperson dies, and then so then my cousin becomes and in the will, so this is interesting, my cousin got the congressperson to put in the will that if they die, then my cousin will become the member of Congress. Wild. And then if my cousin's a member of Congress, then they could run for Senate. And if they ran for Senate, they won, they could be a senator and they could run for president, and then they would be president, and then they could run the country, which runs the world, so the fate of humanity sort of rests with how I treat my cousin, if you think about it. So he said, this is the fate of humanity. And then he lost. And all that money he dumped into this race, because it is consequential for the state of Wisconsin. The Supreme Court is going to see crucial cases. One of the things that they have power over when these cases are brought is the constitutionality or unconstitutionality of these legislative and congressional maps. And so it is true that because of the narrow margins that we see in the majorities in the House and in the state legislature, then you could, and this has happened, imagine that if you knock down one of these maps because it's so gerrymandered and you create a more fair map, you would see more Democratic representation, and that could very well happen because Republicans benefit a lot. Democrats sometimes do it too. Republicans really benefit from the gerrymandered, unrepresentative maps that they push through. So if a reasonable liberal majority Supreme Court knocks that down, it could make a big difference. I don't know if the fate of humanity, everything impacts the fate of humanity. Elon Musk said, I expected to lose, but there's value to losing a piece for a positional gain. What did you gain? You lost 20 mil. You handed out even more money to people. You put your credibility on. You made this race a little bit about yourself, and people didn't like you. And a lot of people said they went out to vote because they didn't like Musk trying to get involved. But apparently got positional gain. Interesting political piece. Musk said Wisconsin could decide the fate of Western civilization. Now he says he expected to lose. Brad Schimmel got thumped. He got thumped and humped and rumped by the liberal candidate. We're really happy it went this way. Democratic-backed candidate Susan Crawford had an overwhelming victory Tuesday night, securing the court's liberal majority. Republicans lost decisively in Tuesday night's Wisconsin Supreme Court election. Elon Musk is still saying everything's going according to plan. Musk catapulted the state Supreme Court election in national view, vocally backing conservative candidate Brad Schimmel, who also clinched President Donald Trump's endorsement and pouring millions into the effort to get him elected. But people said no to Elon Musk, which is really exciting. Now, Harry Hinton here lays out the fact that Elon Musk is political poison.
If you are a Republican candidate running in a swing state, you don't want Elon Musk anywhere near you. Yes, maybe you like the money, but you do not want his presence in your state. Why is that? Elon Musk, simply put, is an unpopular guy. He is political poison. Look in Wisconsin, his net favorable rating, minus 12 points, 12 points underwater. That is an even worse number when you look nationally. Look at that. It's minus 17 points. So if there's one big lesson to take away from
It is a perfect microcosm of the Trump administration's removal of due process, aggressive deportation tactics that go over the line of aggressive into illegal, and they're stripping people's human rights away and sending them to like terrifying prisons in El Salvador. But this is a little bit different. This story is about a well-respected MMA coach who always posts training tips and is based out of Australia. I found this post on Twitter, and I want to break it down for you guys. So, the well-respected MMA coach says he arrived in the US for an already scheduled seminar, but was detained at the border, thrown in a federal prison, and ultimately deported. And the details of his story are harrowing. Now, I went to his Instagram to go verify, and all of this is true. He is an MMA training coach. He's actually got a pretty big audience because he gives tips online. So he was traveling to the US for a seminar, and he made this post just a few hours ago describing his absolutely terrifying journey. Now, I believe this photo is an AI recreation of what it would look like for him to be in jail. But the story that he tells has been verified, and we've seen this pattern happen all around the country. I mean, somebody in Chicago, where I live and record, was thrown into the back of a van, was driven around for 8 hours in circles, and then they finally realized, wait a minute, this dude is a citizen, he's just a little bit brown. We can't target brown people, but they still are. They still are just targeting people if they're vaguely brown. But here's what Coach Subotic said. From seminar to cell, my 24 hours in a U.S. federal prison, arrested for too much knowledge in MMA. He's obviously being a little bit memey about it, but no, literally, they arrested him for zero reason whatsoever, and he's just an MMA trainer. It's absolutely wild. Before we dig into this, I do want to say the Adam Mockler channel. This channel is in the top 10 fastest growing political channels in all of YouTube for the first quarter of 2025 because of you guys. So thank you. We are beating Charlie Kirk, Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly. We're close to Joe Rogan in terms of growth. So all that I ask is that you scroll down, subscribe, and let's beat Joe Rogan for Q2. That would be amazing. But let's continue the story. Arrested for too much knowledge in MMA. I arrived in America excited, ready to coach my seminar. It was supposed to be a great trip. Instead, I got stopped at the border. Immigration pulled me aside and took me into an isolated room. The officer interviewing me looked like he was looking for something wrong. I mean, that sounds about right. They're looking for any reason. They're looking for a little bit of a scratch on your neck to say that that's like probable cause to deport you because you got in a fight or something. The officer interviewing me looked like he was looking for something wrong. It was obvious why I was in the US. I gave them every specific detail about my seminar, my plans, everything. As someone with a public profile, it's very easy to verify who you are sometimes because you just show people at security, hey, this is my profile on Instagram. I'm genuinely just doing a work trip. It's all just a work trip. They kept me in the room for 3 hours, asking endless questions. I was collaborative. They told me there was a mistake with my visa and that they were taking me to jail, quote, until they figure out what's next. Just like that. No clear explanation. No chance to talk to anyone, no rights. They handcuffed me, put me in a car, and drove me to a federal prison. They stripped me of everything, took my clothes, gave me jail clothes, fingerprinted me, took photos, searched me. They gave me a blanket and sheet, then they walked me to my cell block 4B. The moment the door opened, it was chaos, and there's more to the story, but let me say, again, this is a perfect microcosm of what happens when you remove due process from someone. We've seen this happen all across the US. There was a dude deported recently, I believe from Philly, to El Salvador, to a mega prison with zero due process. And then the Trump admin realized they made a, quote, administrative error. How can you make an administrative error with human rights? Like literally having someone tortured in El Salvador. And they said that a court ordered this dude not to be removed, but they made a mistake and put him on the plane with all of the other people that had zero due process. Or we could talk about the people being deported for tattoos. Not because they were found to be a member of a gang by a court. No. Because some Trump officials or some ICE agents saw tattoos on their arm. It is wild. But to continue this story, the moment the door opened, it was chaos. Fights between gangs, people screaming, arguing over food, what to watch on TV, crazy people running around, madness. The guard walked me to cell 221, where there was a filthy mattress with patches of piss and blood. This dude just came to teach a seminar. All the dude wanted to do was teach a seminar, and they're treating him like he's a gang member. The guard told me to hurry up so I could get some food. I dropped my stuff and went downstairs. While I was in line, 4 guys started beating the hell of another guy, smashing his head into the fence. I wasn't even hungry. I just grabbed an apple, ate it, and walked straight back to my cell. When I got back, 2 Mexican guys were in there stealing my blanket and sheet. I said, hey bro, what are you doing? One of them replied, getting my stuff. I said, that's my stuff. And he looked at me and said, what are you gonna do about it? We had a fight. I got my stuff back. I hope the MMA fighter won. It seems like he did if he got his stuff back. The other one ran out of the cell, screaming. The people in nearby cells came to watch what was going on. When the guards rushed up, no one said anything. The guard looked at me and said, you got a good welcome. Keep your head straight or you're going to stay here longer. Again, the dude was just trying to cross the border. The dude was genuinely just trying to come over into the US. So he continues in another post and he says, I stepped out of my cell and met a few Romanian guys next door. They warned me, be careful. Those guys are part of a gang. They're going to come for you later. I went downstairs. I started looking around. Some people stared at me. Some people nodded at me. I didn't know who was who. So I just sat in a corner watching and trying to figure things out. A Venezuelan guy came up and said, hey bro, are you a fighter? You beat up the Mexican? I nodded to him. He told me, they didn't see your ears. You don't mess with a guy with ears like that. They do that to every new guy. They try to intimidate you and take your shit. Obviously, this dude has cauliflower ears as an MMA fighter. He said, there's another fighter here, Samoan. You should meet him. The Mexicans I just fought kept watching me from upstairs. I knew it wasn't over. Then the Venezuelan guy asked me, are you Christian? I said, yes. He replied, at 8:30 p.m., we pray in the basketball court. Join us. Later, one of the gang leaders approached me. Hey, fighter, what's your name? Literally, this dude had to spend 24 hours in a terrifying prison environment because the Trump admin racially profiled him. Then it goes, hey, fighter, what's your name? Renato. He nodded. They told me you're Christian. You're joining us for prayer. Then he says, I was a fighter. Now I'm a coach. And then he says, I know you. I've watched your videos. I can't believe you're here. I noticed the phone's downstairs, so I asked some of the inmates, how can I call my family to tell them what's going on? They told me, you can't. You have to wait 3 days to get your number. He continues to tell the story. He walked back to his cell, but he was exhausted. When he walked in, he saw his cellmate and realized he was one of the guys trying to steal the blanket. They said, I'm cool if you are. It all just seems intense. And here's going back to the legality of it. At the airport, when he was leaving, they kept him in a room without telling me when he'd fly home. Eventually, he got the info. He was being deported from the US. On arrival, he got sent to a prison and was being deported. Just insane. An officer walked me to the plane. Before taking off the handcuffs, he looked at me and said, I'm sorry this happened to you. They messed up big. It shouldn't have gone this way. This whole experience was unreal. It's insane how easily someone can take away your freedom, lock you in a federal prison without a clear reason. No explanation, no warning, just like that, you're treated like the worst criminal. I believe in respecting the rules, but putting someone in federal prison over a missing detail in a visa application, that is wild, especially with no due process, no ability to defend yourself. I apologize to everyone who attended my seminar. It was sold out. I was excited to meet you and share my love for the sport with all of you. It's crazy. Now I'm back in Australia. It's terrifying, and we're going to see more and more stories like this as the Trump admin continues their aggressive and illegal deportation tactics. Now, I know that it can be hard to keep up between the tariff stories, between Signalgate, and between these stories, but we're trying to have a healthy balance of coverage of all of it. Right now, we'll be covering a lot of tariff stuff because that is currently melting the economy, but I think it's equally as important to be covering these deportation overreaches, and if you agree, make sure you drop a like. Make sure
It's billed as the hands-off protest, a multi-city expression of popular dissent in places ranging from Boston to New York to the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., which witnessed the largest protest since Donald Trump began his second term as president.
They think they're going to overthrow the heroes of American democracy. They don't know who they're dealing with.
So are you ready to fight? Are you ready to fight? Let's go fight and win.
This is a very different demographic from those seen in previous protests.
It's not only the young and the angry, it is the middle-aged, the elderly. Washington, D.C. has been the center of the federal government, and tens of thousands of workers have been laid off under the Trump administration.
Love, not hate, makes America great.
But it's also a sample of Americans who have been dismayed by what they view as the cruel and unfeeling policies of the president and the man he selected to lead what is called the Department of Government Efficiency, Elon Musk.
I think everybody is afflicted with what's happening right now. We have young, we have old, we have middle-aged, we have everyone here, and we've got to come together to make a difference.
The message at protests throughout the nation is constant. Don't just resist today, but do so on Monday or week and continue through the months to come. Mike Hanna, Al Jazeera, Washington.
As the impact of Donald Trump's swift and wide-ranging tariffs start to take effect. Speaking via video link at a political gathering in Italy, Elon Musk said he could see a future where there was a free trade zone between the two economies. As it stands, the EU will have to pay a 20% levy on all imports into the US. World leaders have continued to react to the new economic order, with the British Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer and the French President Emmanuel Macron promising to coordinate their positions on any retaliatory action. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of people have marched in dozens of US cities in protest against Donald Trump and his policies since his return to the White House. Well, I'm joined now by Peter Draper, the Executive Director for the Institute for International Trade at Adelaide University. Peter, thank you very much for joining us here on BBC News. Australia itself has been hit with baseline tariffs of 10%. The Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, said the nation wouldn't introduce its own tariffs in return. So what do you make of the position that Australia finds itself in now?
I think it's the correct decision that the Prime Minister has taken. Imposing our own tariffs would amount to self-harm, and that's the basic position the government has taken. And retaliating against the United States would invite further retaliations, and trying to cut some sort of special deal would be a deal with an administration that essentially can't be trusted. So there's really no good options here. And what the government is doing is to double down on its diversification strategies, which have been in place for some time, while at the same time putting in place policies to build economic and trade resilience. So I think a pretty comprehensive response and quite a defensible one.
Because Australia quite often has to navigate between its ally, the US, and the regional power of China. So how are they going to strike the balance best for the country of Australia?
Yeah, that's always a balancing act. And one should recall that a couple of years ago, China also coerced Australia. And at that time, about 40% of our exports went to China. To put that into perspective, about 5% of our exports go to the United States. So we're far less exposed to the US market, and we can therefore, outside of a few sector and product stories, particularly beef exports to the US, we can take the hit, relatively speaking. In the case of China, when they coerced us, we opted again to just double down and take the hit and diversify. And that's what most commodity exporters particularly were able to do. But the bottom line, I think, on the foreign policy front is that this Trump initiative draws the region, generally speaking, closer to China. This is a golden opportunity for China to cement its regional relationships and displace the United States in the region.
And what?
Well, it's hard to know if many people who voted for Trump turned out, but there were demonstrations in more than 1,200 cities across the U.S., and I was on the ground here in Washington at the near the Washington Monument, and there were certainly tens of thousands of people, expressing fear and anger toward Trump and Musk and Vance, principally Trump and Musk, around such a range of issues, every imaginable issue, from the attacks on democracy to tariffs, free speech, social welfare programs, NATO, Ukraine, science, on and on. I could take up all our time talking about the issues. And, there was a great deal of creativity as well in the kinds of signs that people had up,
President Donald Trump's trade tariffs and the radical shakeup of U.S. politics driven by his administration. Hands-off rallies have been held in all 50 states. There's growing public anger at Trump's policies as well as Elon Musk's cost-cutting campaign.
It was the largest single day of protest since President Donald Trump returned to office in January. Under the banner Hands Off, opponents of Trump's policies rallied, from critics of his economic policies to those concerned about civil rights to climate activists in towns and cities in all 50 states, from New York's Fifth Avenue.
I feel horrible. Immigrants are getting deported. The president's so worried about 0.1% of the population, transgender people, but he doesn't care about the economy, he doesn't talk about lowering prices, inflation.
To Charlotte, North Carolina.
I'm here today as a person with a disability to stand up for all the 70 million people in America who receive disability, who receive Medicaid or Medicare. They are important. Their voice is important.
In Houston, Texas, people came out in defiance of a tornado warning.
I'm here today to say hands off of our democracy, hands off of our rights, hands off of our futures. I was a little afraid today that the weather might scare people from coming out, but I was so delighted to see that everyone braved the rainy weather and came out to fight for our democracy.
In the capital, Washington, D.C., demonstrators congregated on the National Mall.
We object to the everything that Donald Trump is doing, basically in terms of his power grab and all the damage he's doing to the economy and to democracy.
Taxes. The hands-off organizers managed to bring together a wide range of those unhappy with the government, from civil rights organizations to army veterans to LGBTQ groups to climate activists. They all had one message for the man in the Oval Office.
This is what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like.
For more
video behind me, the biggest protest in Chicago since President Trump took office. A significant crowd spilling out of Daley Plaza and filling up the streets of Chicago. The anti-Trump hands-off protest, as it's called, was one of hundreds taking place simultaneously nationwide. Arnold Brennan was on the ground speaking with protesters about their biggest concerns.
I haven't seen a demonstration this big in Chicago ever.
Like oceans of people.
But it looks like this entire square is full.
When a protest gets too big for Daley Plaza, people stand where they can.
In the middle of the street.
This crowd stands against President Donald Trump and billionaire Elon Musk.
We will not be silenced.
Their message is hands off.
Hands off!
A protest against the administration's actions to cut government jobs, shutter agencies, deport immigrants, impose tariffs, and more.
I am concerned about people being kidnapped off the streets and shipped to hellhole prisons. I am concerned about our economy tanking. I'm concerned about the fact that we have a president who doesn't care about people.
Things are being defunded. People are losing their jobs. Just really terrible things are happening in this country.
There's something that every single person in America cares about that these people are attacking.
This is one of more than 1,200 demonstrations happening all over the country. There are protests in all 50 states. Here in Chicago, Daley Plaza is overflowing. After speeches, the people here will hit the pavement to march.
Look at save the future of the nation right in front of the very place that saw the start of our nation. This is what the rally looked like over at City Hall, where thousands of protesters gathered at noon and then marched down here to the Liberty Bell and Independence Mall, a mass showing of unity against several Trump administration actions and policies. The demonstration, one of hundreds planned across the country, and the largest one in our area that also saw crowds gather over in Newtown and Conshohocken. The Philly protests turned into a rally in Old City that included speeches from elected officials like Congressman Brendan Boyle and Philly's first openly LGBT councilperson, Rue Landau. Protesters in Philly say they're protesting Trump and allies like Elon Musk's
Let Pennsylvania be a beacon for fair elections. And let the United States be that beacon across the world. Hands off! Hands off! Hands off!
Fraud, waste, and abuse are the three words that are being used to dismantle our government. These are mistruths spread by Elon Musk and the administration trying to take away our funding.
Is now gathering to demand the president stop what they're calling an assault on families, jobs, health care, and Social Security. Eyewitness News reporter Tim Caputo live to explain this national movement dubbed Hands Off. Tim?
Jory and Michelle, you see behind me, the crowd is fairly big at this point, getting bigger by the minute. They expect about 7,000 people here in Pershing Square. And to give you a sense of just how many people are here right now, where I'm standing is kind of on the back end. Over by the palm trees up on 5th Street is where the stage is, and they've filled out this entire park all the way through. And really in the last 20, 30 minutes, we've seen people at almost every street corner here in downtown LA working their way over here. So this crowd is only going to get bigger as thousands, potentially 7,000 people come out in this passionate rally against President Donald Trump and his policies in the first few months of his second term in office. It has been a sea of signs, all adamantly opposed to the president's agenda, including
hands off! Hands off! Our democracy, hands off! Hands off! Our social justice, hands off! Hands off! Our economy.
Big crowds holding hands-off signs surround the Parkman bandstand.
What do you want their hands off?
Everything. Women's bodies, Social Security, trans kids. I mean, he's just going after everybody.
Then groups of people with disabilities lead the way down Tremont Street to City Hall Plaza, where Boston police say 25 to 30,000 people came to hear more about today's theme.
Response to President Trump's new tariffs and the cuts to the federal government overseen by billionaire Elon Musk. It's one of the largest anti-Trump events that we've seen here in Central Texas since President Trump returned to the White House. Today we saw signs, chants, and speeches from the steps. Several state lawmakers were here and spoke, including Austin Senator Sarah Eckhart. There was a lot of attention on what Elon Musk and Doge are doing, but this wasn't really about one
violent National Day of Action. Event organizers say they are marching, rallying, and protesting against the actions of both President Trump and Elon Musk. The goal is to, quote, build a movement against the looting of our country. One protester tells us the administration's actions are actually working against the people.
Hands off, demonstrating against a number of policies recently put into place by the Trump administration and Elon Musk. Drastic cuts to the federal workforce and slashing federal funding across several government programs were top of the agenda. There was also opposition on other issues such as immigration and tariffs. Well, hands-off protests also happened here in the Bay Area. Oakland seniors rallied together earlier over their fears of the future of Social Security, as did veterans at the Civic Center in San Francisco. Our John Ramos spoke to one who's concerned his Social Security checks may soon stop coming.
If people were waiting for an organized pushback against the Trump administration's agenda, it came today. But it didn't come from lawmakers. It came from the people themselves. People gathered in San Francisco to speak out against Donald Trump's executive actions in a scene reminiscent of the massive protests during the Vietnam War.
I feel as intense as I did when I was 20.
Jim Sanderson remembers what it was like in 1970 when Americans lost their belief in not just a war, but the nation itself.
That was a very, it was tearing us apart, and the war and all that. I feel like that again, but now the enemy's from within.
Thousands of people filled the street and plaza in front of City Hall, their faces reflecting a full range of life experiences and concerns.
Thank you for reminding us that sometimes the only way to be heard is to disrupt the status quo.
In the front row was May Alice from the East Bay. She, like a lot of people, is concerned about the possibility of cuts to Social Security. But she thinks it's less likely to happen if people turn out in numbers like this.
There isn't anybody that doesn't have a mom or a dad or a grandma or grandpa on Social Security. I don't think it's actually going to be actualized. I don't, because there's 70 million people that will hit the streets and throw this guy into a dumpster, you know?
The so-called hands-off rallies were organized by
Donald Trump has decided instead that he's going to Florida to watch a golf tournament and to go to a golf dinner tonight. Well, but look what they have tucked into their pockets. They have little American flags just below the flag of their own countries sewn onto their sleeves. In the capital city of Lithuania yesterday, thousands of soldiers and dignitaries and also just ordinary people lined up in the streets to pay their respects and to honor 4 American soldiers who died in Lithuania this past week during a training exercise. The ceremony was attended by the president of Lithuania, who gave a speech on the occasion. He said that for Lithuanians, serving your country is not just a duty, but an emotion. And you could really see that among the people who gathered. Lithuanian citizens were moved to tears, moved to genuine grief. But again, this was a ceremony for Americans, for American soldiers. Officials arranged for an archbishop to bless the motorcade before it drove to the airport to start the process of returning those remains, returning those soldiers to the U.S. In our country, of course, it is a sacred tradition that when members of the armed services die in the line of duty overseas, their remains come home to the U.S. in what's called a dignified transfer. Their remains are flown home specifically to Dover Air Base with American flags draped over the coffins. It's a very somber, very important, very serious, very specific ceremony. And a dignified transfer is often attended by the President of the United States as a sign of respect from the Commander-in-Chief. After that very moving send-off from Lithuania and from the government and the people of Lithuania, the White House announced here in the United States that when those 4 young fallen American soldiers landed back home here in the U.S., President Donald Trump would not attend the dignified transfer. He would not be waiting at Dover to pay respects to the service members who died, even as Lithuania's president made sure he was there to see them off. Donald Trump has decided instead that he's going to Florida to watch a golf tournament and to go to a golf dinner tonight. You know, given his previous comments, I guess you could say this is consistent with his apparent level of investment on this issue. I got to tell you, we do not play a lot of
consumers, and I'm not a fan of jacking up taxes on American consumers. So my hope is these tariffs are short-lived and they serve as leverage to lower tariffs across the globe.
That is his hope. Republicans on the Hill are uncomfortable, as you can see, as Donald Trump's tariffs continue to anger our trade partners and send the markets into a tailspin. But are they uncomfortable enough to actually do anything to rein the president in? Joining us now, Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar, who represents the state of Minnesota. She's also the ranking member of the Senate Committee on Agriculture. Good to have you.
Thanks, Katie. I was thinking the same thing as I heard Ted.